The teacher remarked, since they both teach spell practice, then how about recording their research? Machiavelli was quite surprised and asked if he also taught this subject. The interlocutor did not at all expect that he would be humiliated like this in front of all the students, and was very amazed. Further reflection on his face changed to anger, and he thought that this was just some scoundrel fallen nobleman. It was unclear how he dared to disgrace him in front of the students, and even if he didn't think it was worth it, he would get away with it. The hero thought that he didn't even know that he also taught manifestation. Machiavelli said that all this was good, and would they agree to have a duel in 4 days. Chris angrily agreed and then turned around and left there. Then Adrian turned to the professor and apologized, because if it weren't for him, nothing would have happened. The hero in response only told him to think better about how to win. Jackson still has the advantage at the moment, but it's really too late to give up. As a result, it turns out that in battles there is always a place for unexpected variables. The student was surprised to ask what he meant. The professor answered him that he had had this variable for a long time, so he in turn only had to use it at the right moment. The interlocutor lowered his head down and thought that this was exactly so, because if he did this, his trouble would be in his hands. However, he remembered the man who smiled and motioned for him to cover his mouth. So Adrian immediately shouted to the professor that he wanted to defeat Jackson using only his skills. The main character was surprised to hear a desperate cry from this boy for help. The student at that moment was confident enough in himself and asked Professor Roger to prepare him. Machiavelli only looked with surprise at this determination of the guy who asked him for help. Adrian remembered the girl who told him to remember what she taught him. It should not be casually flaunted to others, because if he does this, trouble will not keep him waiting long. And what's more, there's something else. It turns out that with these very actions she earns her living, so doesn't he want her to die of hunger on the street? The boy became wary and said, "Of course not," to the teacher. She stroked him and said that this did not mean that she forbade the use of these techniques. It turns out that as soon as he feels that he needs them, let him act. There always comes a time in life when he needs to make one choice or another. It was on this occasion that she told Adrian that you were following his heart. Machiavelli froze after hearing a request for help from this boy. He did not understand what he was saying. It was completely unclear what the hell this student just said. After all, it turns out that he made a bet with another teacher, knowing only about his extraordinary abilities, and he declares that he wants to win thanks to his skills. What kind of skills are these that he doesn't even know about? Then he decided that it didn't matter, and in any case, this was a good opportunity to test his level of training. Therefore, after a few moments of his own reflection, he said that he agreed and would show him how to gain an advantage in a magical duel. Their training may seem like real torture to him, and besides, it does not guarantee him victory. The boy, without even thinking, answered that he agreed. The professor said that in this case they wouldn't start. Adrian asked if it would be right now, although he agreed to this. On the way, the main character thought that it seemed that their rivals were already celebrating their victory, but he would see what their confident faces would be like in 4 days. Sometime after training, Adrian lay in his room and said how tired he was. I also thought about the fact that I almost died during this very training, and it turns out that this was just her first one. At the same time, it was unclear why Professor Roger was so confident in him. After all, he does not use the most traditional magic. I also wondered if the professor knew something that he didn't know. While Adrian had these thoughts in his head, he fell fast asleep. And somewhere in his house was Chris, who said that it seemed that in his free time, Roger Selassie gave personal consultations to that boy. So, most likely there is nothing to doubt, because it is true he may not show it, but the man knows that he desperately wants to win. Then he turned to Jackson, who was in the office, and asked what his goal was. The guy was inspired and angrily said that he needed to defeat this tax commoner. The man interrupted and said that this is all I need, because he must show the insurmountable gulf that separates the commoner and the aristocrats. Of course, he has no doubt about victory, but it would be better to play it safe. And so he took out some kind of bottle. The guy asked what it was, and the teacher answered a magic amplifier. Let him drink it before the battle. The war immediately became wary and said that if he was caught, he could be expelled from the academy. Chris said that this was a special invention of the Benamor family. Therefore, he has no need to worry because no one will know anything. This insignificant brat will use all possible methods to defeat him, so they will do the same. Jackson agreed with the man and thought that this was true. Although his honor would be easily hurt, he would never give in to a pathetic plebeian. The professor in turn smiled and thought that his ward had made the right choice. Soon the day of the magic duel arrived and everyone was at the training ground. A fairly large number of spectators gathered and heatedly discussed the events that were about to happen. The guy asked if it was right that an aristocrat has more chances to win, because his level of training is higher than that of a commoner. He was told that a freshman has something to show. In addition, it was this guy who participated in the capture of the werewolf, although in the end it was Professor Roger who dealt with him, not him. The student said that he was coached quite well by the professor, and it seems that Chris is on the side of the aristocrats. The interlocutor asked who it was and realized that she was a professor, and that she was responsible for the second opponent. The man heard this and got angry, and the students continued the discussion. It turns out that they both teach the practice of spells, so they are often compared, and probably this is unpleasant. Chris thought that today he would knock Roger's arrogance. In the end, it was all these people who would witness his defeat. After a while, someone entered the training ground. Everyone immediately turned their attention there and saw how the rector of the academy entered along with the rest of the professors and greeted Chris Benamur. The man was dumbfounded and asked the lady what brought her here. And it turns out that Professor Hugo was also here. The woman replied that she had received news that something interesting was planned. It was only because of this that she brought him with her. Then she said that she had not seen Professor Roger for a long time, and how he was doing was interesting. He thanked him and said he was not complaining. She heard that the men made a bet, so interestingly he bet. The hero replied that he had made Adrian's choice, Jessica noticed, which means Chris bet on Jackson. Now she is looking forward to the battle and hopes that no one will get hurt. The deputy said that the lady is not very worried at all, because protective equipment helps create a barrier responsible for the safety of the wearer. Then she noticed that their participants had already arrived. The first to arrive was Adrian, who was really in protective gear. He had support from the audience. Leo told him to crush this pompous aristocrat, and Tracy also supported him. Also, on the other hand, Jackson appeared, who was also supported and said that they believed in him, and also asked to show real strength. The teacher approached the participants and told them that before they began, they had to pass a short test. Adrian turned to his opponent and said that when he loses, let him remember to keep his promise. The guy smiled when he heard this and said to just dream, because victory will be his. And so the teacher examined Jason and said that everything was fine, so it was the next one's turn. And when I paid attention to the guy, I asked what it was hanging on him. Adrian replied that if the professor talks about it, then this is his military weapon. The man took it in his hands and said that it looked like a sword. The interlocutor hesitated and said that this was not so, because the black one was simply made in the shape of a sword. But it was not him. Then he asked if this was forbidden by chance. The teacher examined it, and thought that the blade seemed to be safe and blunt, so he said that everything was in order. The participant was benevolent to him, and the man said that they don't know the rules. The first one with a magical barrier will fall off his protective equipment, lose, and now let them get ready. The curator of the fight said that he would not start now, and Adrian immediately sent his energy towards his opponent. At the same time, Jackson also did not stand still, and using his magic wand, he directed the fire forward. Leo saw what happened and said that they were moving literally at the same pace. The girl noticed that they were quite fast. Adrian wondered what the same guy used with the element of fire. He in turn knew that he would start with the strongest element. The aristocrat began to think that his opponent was doing better than he expected, and he would be at a disadvantage. But this did not happen only if the amount of his mana did not exceed several times. And so his element of fire, which was now used, dominated the second element of his competitor. She completely suppressed Adrian's power, and then launched an attack, so the guy managed to dodge. Immediately after that she flew forward, and it was clear that the power of this technique was strong. Jackson saw what happened and shouted to let this pathetic plebeian know his place and continue to use force. In order to defend himself, the commoner also used his technique and directed it into the opponent's element. After this, the forces converged again. But it was clear that the aristocrat dominated this fight because of his power. A friend who saw this fight from the side said that it was bad, because Adrian was starting to lose a little. Quantity fought below and thought to himself that at this rate he would lose and it was time to do something. Namely, he should use the technique that Professor Roger taught him shortly before. Jackson saw how his opponent did not use magic and simply rushed to attack him. So he immediately began to laugh and asked if he was giving up already. Chris also smiled when he noticed this and said that the duel was over. But suddenly he noticed something strange. As the professor took a closer look at the attack that had just been made, he wondered if he was right. After all, it turns out that this is the same technique. Adrian rushed forward, and there was a magic circle at the tip of his weapon. The teacher realized that this was a sliding maneuver. Because of this, he was amazed and did not understand how this boy knew the technique of battle magicians. So could it be that Roger taught him this technique not long before? Although right now there is a more important question, because it is completely unclear how this plebeian was able to master the sliding maneuver in just 3 days. Jackson didn't understand what was happening. Magic was based on concentration, and if he continued to move so chaotically, it would be difficult for him to concentrate on the manifestation. Although he shouldn't worry now and needs to be calmer because everything is under control. Because it turns out that he has already cast the spell, and with this he will put an end to it with a trick exactly, no matter what he does there. Adrian in turn rushed forward, continuing the attack and dodging the opponent's force that was ahead. The aristocrat noticed how his spell simply passed through that very place, and there was no one there. Therefore, because of what happened he became angry, because he realized that nothing came of it. After Adrian dodged, he immediately prepared to attack with his strength. The very flash that appeared on the tip of his weapon headed straight towards the aristocrat. With this very action he was hit in the head. Then, when the guy knocked down his opponent, he immediately approached him and pointed his weapon. At the same time, he immediately said that now it was his turn to attack. Jackson understood where this was all going and very wary, asked to wait a second. But it was too late because Adrian was not going to stop and ended this fight in a few moments. The crowd of onlookers that had gathered in the stands exclaimed joyfully and heard that the winner would now be announced. The curator of this magical duel approached the guy with glasses, and raising his hand, said that the winner was Adrian. Leo, as well as a large number of students, were happy and said that he was cool and that the training had paid off. Those who were rooting for his opponent said that Jackson was a scoundrel, because he had tarnished the reputation of the aristocrats. The girl noted that she knew that he could not be relied on, because it turns out that he boasted of being the son of a baron, but he cheated the plebeians, and in the end he turned out to be just a loser who disgraced them all. The guy heard all these words and was horrified, and also wondered if he, Jackson Filiot, had lost. Because of this, a wave of anger immediately came over him, and he told himself that this simply could not happen. Therefore, the guy began to shout that his opponent was cheating. Otherwise, how else would he manage to cast the spell while moving? And in this case, he was just going to finish him off, so the aristocrat rose from his seat and began to use his magic. Tracy saw what was happening and asked what he was doing, and Leo also told Jackson to come to his senses and not do anything. They shouted for Adrian to run away. It was already too late, because the aristocrat did not listen to anyone and changed his technique, so that it was heading straight towards the people. The guy turned his attention there and saw that it was quite dangerous, because the curator also fell under the influence of this fire. So the memory of the words of the teacher immediately surfaced in his head, who said that the moment does not always come when he needs to make his choice. After all this happens, then Adrian needs to follow his heart. And further the guy rushed forward or using his weapon tried to protect himself as well as the teacher from this fire. From the outside it might seem that he was literally holding back this flow with the help of his weapon. In fact, the force of this attack was powerful enough to hit both of them with ease. But a few moments passed after it all started, and the fire was completely extinguished. The students who were here asked what it was all about. Could he really be able to cut the magic? Roger thought about it. After all, he was a stubborn boy after all. He did not hesitate to use this technique at the most necessary moment. Professor Chris was amazed, but what he saw in front of him and realized that this was anti-magic, the very direction that allows one to cancel the effects of magic. All this happened in conjunction with the sliding maneuver technique, and it is unclear how he learned all this. Jackson in turn stood, and his limbs trembled. But after Adrian suppressed the technique so that it was directed in his direction, he immediately rushed forward. The opponent saw what happened because of the fast speed and was unable to react. That's why the guy easily approached him and then punched him quite hard in the head. Because of this, the aristocrat's body immediately fell to the ground and was now definitely defeated. At that moment Adrian was quite angry and said that he hoped this man would accept his defeat with honor. But in the end, it turned out exactly the opposite, and the guy did not expect that he would turn out to be such a scoundrel. One of the students smiled after seeing everything and said that Jackson doesn't even know how to lose with dignity. Then he turned to the man who was sitting next to him and asked if this was true. A sophomore was sitting next to him, whose name was Freddie Wilberg. The cold one's interlocutor noted that he didn't care, because initially he did not arouse any interest in him at all. But if we talk about Adrian then, on the contrary, you need to keep an eye on him, because this is not the first time he has proven his superiority over the aristocrats. Next, the guy turned to his friend Henry and said that he should leave here. Both of them rose from their seats, and immediately began to snatch from the training ground. Freddie turned his attention to the main character. The man in turn also looked in their direction, and they made eye contact. After this happened, the student immediately turned in the other direction and slowly left. But Chris turned to Professor Roger and asked if he knew that this student had anti-magic skills. The hero replied that he knew and what exactly the problem was. The interlocutor asked if he was still asking. Machiavelli replied that he did not at all understand the reason for his irritation. After all, he is responsible for the first-year students, so he really didn't even bother to familiarize himself with their personal affairs. In any case, anti-magic did not affect the outcome in any way. Chris had no answer to this, and he only got angry. The hero stood up and said that he remembers correctly that they argued about scientific research. The interview he noted that this was true, and whether he wanted to look at something specific, Roger noted that this was not the case. He did not claim that he needed it. The man asked what he meant now. Machiavelli replied that it was simply not his style to argue about the records of other people's research and appropriate them for himself. After these words were spoken, the main character turned around and simply left. The interlocutor did not understand whether he had insulted him again. This was done by himself, Chris Benamor, when the man realized this. You got very angry and thought that Roger Selasi was just a scoundrel. Machiavelli continued her way through the corridors of the academy, and suddenly saw that someone was standing in front. It turned out that it was a girl who was a secret agent, and congratulated the professor on her victory. Only now they attracted even more attention. And isn't that a problem? The teacher replied that everything was fine because it was even good, and the girl asked what he was saying and why this was so. The hero responded to this by saying that Madame Rector was suspicious of him. Sylvia was surprised when she heard this. The man continued to say that she knew that they had infiltrated the inn. Despite his status, it would not be easy for him to gain her trust. The interlocutor did not understand how, after all, he became a professor. He should have been out of danger. Roger noticed that that was why he decided to make a good impression. This had to be done through a duel, but even so, although it was enough, the secret agent now understood everything. The professor turned to her and said that he now needed her help. She was surprised to ask about this issue. The hero extended his own hand in her direction and said that their meetings would be conspicuous until she became an exemplary student. It was only because of this that efforts should be made to reduce the level of suspicion that Sylvia thought that Mr. First Order had given her a personal task. Then he became inspired and said that she understood everything, because she would do everything possible, even if it cost her life. The interlocutor sighed and said that there was no need to die. The girl replied that then he would die on her, even if this mission killed her. It was clear that she was simply glowing with joy. Machiavelli wondered how crazy all this was and noticed what would happen, as she would say, while thinking, this is a hectic economy. The recent event allowed him to convince everyone that he was acting in the interests of Madame Rector, and to make the Black Dawn understand too. Namely that he cannot act rashly enough, but all this cannot last forever. The hero thought that he really should create his own organization, and for this he needs to do something. His thoughts were interrupted by the communication sphere, which gave a sign that someone wanted to talk to him. Machiavelli made contact and asked what was wrong with Hans. The interlocutor noted that he had checked in nearby areas, as he had asked before. After all, in the end, he learned how things were in the criminal world and understood how to act in order to maintain their positions. The hero interrupted him and said that it seemed like it was time to use force. The interlocutor noted that he correctly noticed, and the time had come for heavy artillery. The hero wondered how it was on time. After that, he said that in this case he was moving forward. The comrade asked, "But isn't he busy right now?" "Because he's afraid it will take a lot of time." The professor told him not to worry, because he would try to make sure everything was over as quickly as possible, and in one of the houses it was quite loud. The man got angry, and after that he immediately hit the table, and the boy asked him if everything was okay with him. The interlocutor looked at him quite angrily and asked what he thought about this. All Belfort was required to do was invest money in the project. These were the funds that they invested, and this scoundrel died, leaving them with nothing. The subordinate asked if perhaps they should find another fund, that's all. The leader said that this is precisely what he wanted to talk to the guys about, because it turns out that they don't have to think through further steps to scale their business. He can be the first to say what to do with those scoundrels from the Black Rose group. Suddenly his thoughts were interrupted by some sound from the side. The man drew attention to the man who simply came into them and asked what kind of scoundrel he was. They immediately shouted to him whether he was blind. Because it is very clear to everyone that they are closed. The hero came closer, and the leader asked if he was really deaf. Let him get out of here, and that's all. Roger asked if he understood correctly that he was Henry, the leader of Alice Group. The man asked how he knew him. It turns out that this person is seeing him for the first time. Machiavelli smiled and replied that they had never met before. He was just quite famous. He also asked for forgiveness for forgetting to introduce himself to him. His name in turn is James Moriarty. The interlocutor asked him again if he was really the person he said he was. He knew very well that this was the name of the villainous consultant who runs the criminal system of the Kingdom of Delica, but this man had not hidden his identity for years. It was completely unclear what he forgot here, although now they know it. The leader of the group laughed, and said what he had heard about Professor Moriarty. The hero said that he was very happy, but the interlocutor wondered if he could take his word for it now. Machiavelli asked if he really considered him an impostor. The man replied that his appearance in such a place was quite unexpected. The professor then stated that his suspicions were justified, but everything was not so simple. Then he raised his own hand and said that in this case he would still ask them to refrain and not to pour too much in vain. Those present pointed their weapons at him. The hero glanced at them and said how much equipment there was, of course. He was sorry to disappoint them, but weapons definitely wouldn't help them here. Pointing with his eyes, the leader literally told his subordinates to shoot him in the shoulder too. The guys immediately started doing it, but because they pulled the trigger, nothing happened. And when this happened, they continued to look at their weapons and asked what it was because their pistols did not work. Machiavellian immediately used his magic spell and said that he had warned all of them. Henry was crazy when he saw this spell and realized that it was the silence of fire, but it is unclear when he managed to cast it. The professor saw the confusion on the faces of all these people, as well as their leader, and immediately smiled. Suddenly, the front door that led to this room immediately fell out and hit hard. Everyone present immediately turned their attention there, and were surprised when they saw a monster come out and roar. They immediately became very frightened and started screaming, wondering if it was a werewolf who had come to them. The main characters in turn also paid attention to the monster that was walking straight towards him, but knew that the situation was in his favor. Surprisingly, for everyone, the existence attacked, but stood next to him, literally protecting him. One of the robbers, quite surprised, asked if he had really tamed him, which means that the recent incident was also his doing. Hans thought about what happened recently. He saw the hero and said that he was really here and decided to use this personality. Machiavelli replied that he understood everything correctly, and asked him to be brought up to date. His friend said that this place was a criminal area in which their hideout was located. This very place is shared by 4 criminal organizations, the largest of which is called the Scarlet Group. They in turn perform the dirtiest work and in fact control the entire area, the hero said, which means they are their goal. The comrade replied that this was true and it would be nice to deal with them, but it would not be easy as their strength was too colossal. Therefore, perhaps they should not go ahead, but start with pawns. The interlocutor noted that this is not necessary, because this way they will only waste time. Going head-on will be much faster, so they separate themselves with dictionaries, and the rest will go on their own. Hans said that now is not the best time for this, because not so long ago they began to form gangs. Machiavelli's rock stands. This probably happened just after the death of Belfort Rixon. So let him wait a second, because there is some kind of connection between the Oleg group and the old man. Perhaps all these incidents and victims behind which the aristocrats stood occurred due to the fault of the Ola group. Maybe they did all the dirty work for Belfort, Hans said. Probably the death of the money bag terribly enraged them. The hero noticed that this situation united the crazy scoundrels and thinks they came to their souls just in time. The friend said that he doesn't understand, because this is not just some lousy gang, they are not real mercenaries. And among them, there are even half-knights. Machiavelli said that it's okay. After all, they are far from the order of knighthood. The interlocutor was confused, remarked that he was not sure here, and the elder thought that he did not mean that they were Slovaks, but it was better to remain silent about it. Then he told Hans that he would need his help. He was surprised. But now, when he was in the guise of a werewolf, he thought, did it really mean that he decided to instill fear with his help? In any case, this is even great because she respects playing the role of a target, whispered to the hero, which reminds him that if a fight breaks out, she should not count on him because he will run away. Machiavelli replied that he knew and would just pretend that he was a formidable werewolf. Henry thought that he was the real James Moriarty or not, but he should not be underestimated. The man, of course, assumed that this man was using magic, but he didn't expect to see a pet werewolf, so he smiled and said that now he was sure. The man in front of him is who he claims to be and apologizes for not recognizing him earlier, the hero said, which means he was able to convince him after all. If so, then in this case they will move to the main purpose of his visit, and he is going to build a business in the city. The head asked if this was true, and what kind of business he was talking about. They in turn will be happy to help him in this matter. Machiavelli thanked him and said that just let him make it clear. He despises small and vile organizations. Namely, we are talking about people like them. The man did not understand what he was talking about, and the hero continued to say that, in other words, today he would put an end to the existence of the Scarlet Group. The interlocutor was amazed by what he heard in this information and understood where this could all lead. So after a few moments he immediately turned to his subordinates, and damn, you didn't finish him off. Then he tried to get the weapon that was hidden behind his back, but the hero immediately hit him with his stick. The subordinates took out their daggers and saw that their leader was being attacked, so they called the guy a scoundrel. Hans became wary and whispered to Roger that it didn't look like these guys were running away from them, their heels shining. It was unclear what they should do then. His comrade answered him that he had prepared for his retreat. and after that he used 3 insufficiently and hit the ground hard. As a result of this action, dark magical power began to spread throughout the area. The members of the organization that were here saw a dark shadow begin to approach them, and they did not understand what was happening. And all this matter continued to spread and absorb the light that was here. When it was all over, the men were amazed and asked what happened, because they didn't see anything. Someone said that the elderly should turn off the lights, and it was unclear how they could do this in the pitch darkness. And Machiavelli stood up and was preparing to take out his weapon. He unsheathed his blade and then glared straight at all of his opponents ahead. As a result, he used dark magic of the 3rd rank, which was called the Dream of a Fool. The weapons of the members of this group were stained with blood. They literally attacked each other, using darkness as well as shadows to instill fear into the weakened enemy. This spell, which puts a curse on him, is called connection magic. The head was on the sidelines and saw how his subordinates were killing each other. Then he asked why everything was happening for so long. Let them kill him immediately. Someone asked for help and begged that all this should stop. Several men who already looked like knights drew their blades and used magic to strengthen them. They in turn began to wave their weapons chaotically and clear away the darkness that was spread throughout the area. And so, after the spell was broken, Henry turned his attention to the sides of the establishment in which they were. At the same time, he saw the main character who was near a pile of corpses. With horror he asked how it all happened. Machiavelli heard the despair in his voice and looked at him with a grin. Several men who looked like a knight immediately rushed to attack him and shouted for him to die now. The main character defended himself from them, and thought that the aura was able to cut his magicians. So probably, these were the same knights whose comrades had recently spoken. In that case, he didn't think that he would lose to them, so after thinking about it, he immediately fought off the blow. At the same time, he immediately smiled and decided to do one action that was supposed to distract attention. He threw a bottle of some kind of purple liquid onto the floor, and the robbers immediately turned their attention to him. They jumped back asking what it was as purple smoke spread throughout the room. The man said that it could be nearby so he should retreat. His comrade said that he would under no circumstances be harmed if he covered the body with magic. When he said this, a few moments later you saw a weapon in front of you that was flying at his head. Then he used his blade to repel a dangerous attack and said that it was useless in relation to him. Suddenly, between the sharp blades that were flying towards him, a bottle appeared and broke on the sword. The man felt that something began to happen to his hand, as if poison was being absorbed there, and he began to scream in pain. The second knight, who remained on his feet, wondered if he had been poisoned by the dagger. But it was unclear how she knew that they were powerless against direct contact. The robber, whom the main character struck, held his hand and was interested in the clothes of the one he was hiding. Let him appear in front of him now, and he will finish him off at that very moment. Machiavelli heard him carefully, and appeared from the shadow that was below, and also pointed his weapon. As a result of this attack, he easily pierced the body of the man in front of him with his cane. Another knight tried to protect the head of their organization, and saw what really happened there. The professor in turn slowly began to pull the blade from his opponent's head, looking out of his eyes alive. After that, he pulled out the weapon with a sharp movement and blood gushed out of it, which spread across the floor. The man who turned out to be his opponent hesitated a little and asked if he was really Professor Moriarty. After all, how can they know that same person never had combat skills? The hero asked if he was obliged to explain something now, because in any case, his interlocutor will soon die. The man thought that the loss of his opponent's vigilance allows him to find out about weaknesses. That's why he thought that he would win as long as he acted carefully and decided to shorten the distance. Machiavelli saw that this knight rushed to the attack. Therefore, he again took out the bottle of poison that was in his pocket and threw it towards the man. He of course noticed this attack and immediately wondered if he really thought it would work on him. It turns out that all he needs to do is dodge this attack and then everything will be fine. While he was doing this, his weapon was moving somehow strangely. The organization member felt that something was wrong with his blade and immediately turned his attention from there in surprise. When he saw what really happened, he was dumbfounded because he realized that his sword was there and asked, "Just don't say that it was because of that very bottle." And the main character saw what happened to his opponent, and immediately took out a weapon in the form of a pistol, which was in his pocket. The knight realized with horror what was happening and decided that he needed to drop his sword and start dodging because it turns out that he had no problems with reflexes. But in reality, when I tried to do it, I felt that it was strange in my body and was amazed. With horror, he turned his attention to his stomach and saw how some strange, dark substance pierced it, after which his body immediately began to shake. Next, the man paid attention to the shadow that came from his body and realized that the attack came from there. But it was inexplicable how it came out of his shadow in the first place. The man thought that magic could only be used near the body of the spell, and he did not think that such a thing was possible. The main character pointed his gun in his direction and immediately fired after a few seconds. After he managed to finish off his next opponent, he immediately began to move forward without stopping for a second. He was heading to the head of this very group, which he had recently intended to completely destroy, and announced this. So when I approached him, I immediately put on my hat, and with a smile on my face asked why don't they continue talking. Soon after these events, which happened quite instantly, the drink was poured into the glass. Hans walked to the bar and asked how he drinks after this in general. The hero drew attention to him, and asked if he had really taken off his disguise. The interlocutor noted that he could no longer stand it when he smelled blood, so was this man lying next to him scared to death. Machiavelli replied that not yet, but now that he had received the necessary information, he planned to pass it on to the rest of the organizations. The friend said that he was sure he would figure it out, and it was interesting what he was drinking. The interlocutor noted that this was a 38-year-old Gorgonian. Aga asked. Hans asked to give it to him too. It's not clear why you're only here for a glass. The hero replied that he felt bad and he broke everything. His comrade said to leave behind because he had to try, even if he vomited. Then he asked what he would do with the remaining members of all his group. Roger said that he would find a couple of useful people, and say goodbye to the rest. On the second floor of the office, there are documents, and an account book. They will help him. Hans said that a lot of work awaits him. Doesn't he think that this is too much? The hero replied that he was prepared. It must be that the interlocutor does not know, but he has friends who can help. The guy asked if this is so. It turns out that there is no one better for this job. So does he really think that they will come to his aid? Machiavelli noted that they said that they would come as soon as they finished their work. He wonders if he really hates them so much. Hans said that this is so, because they are all crazy, although he knows that it is not for him to judge. But what is wrong with his face? Then he turned around and noticed that even if he was against it, they would still follow his plans. He remembered that the rector suspected him, and was not afraid to act so frivolously. The man told him to calm down because they would not follow them, because they would definitely not take the risk of my accident, especially when the rector is closely watching them, but she will not cause a response either. Then the comrade said that all this sounded plausible, and what he still planned to call the organization. The hero asked what other name it would be. The interlocutor asked if he wasn't planning to take control of Leatherwelk. But if this is so, then at least he needs at least some kind of name. Machiavelli thought about it, and asked how many people they had. The guy replied that if you look, there are about 10 people, including them. The man said that in this case he had a great idea and therefore wanted to call it Unknown. Hans asked if he really wanted to call their group Unknown. His comment replied that that was the idea, so it really sounded bad. The younger one continued to pour the drink, and said that it was okay because he liked it quite a lot. After that, he handed over a glass and asked if they would drink one more. The main character in response to this also held out his glass, and with a smile on his face said that, of course they will. After that, they bumped into each other, and it was said that they were creating a new organization. Sometime after the incident, Selina turned to Professor Roger, and asked why he did not have an assistant. Machiavelli looked at her in surprise and did not even know what to answer about this. But he soon said that this is how it turns out. He doesn't need him. The girl noticed that 80 students attend his lectures and isn't it completely difficult for him to cope? The man replied that there were no difficulties at all, and the interlocutor said that in this case, he was simply incredible. The hero thought that he had no helpers, and it turned out that he was hunched over here all the time. So, I turned to the woman and asked if she had an assistant. She replied that she did, but she didn't really need him. Although it turns out that she only has 3 of them, Roger was discouraged and thought that she had said that she did not need help or that the professor usually had 10 assistants. It was quite loud near the man because the teachers were discussing pressing matters and he turned his attention to the side. There he saw Chris Benamore, who, as always, was angry in where he went. The hero realized who it was and looked at his assistants. Noticed that there were definitely more than 3 of them. The old man who was sitting next to him told the professor that he also needed to take a few. Matilda said that this was so. Otherwise, it would become harder and harder every day. Selina said that this was accurate, and that at least 5 were needed. Another teacher suggested that if he wanted, she could make a list of good students. The interlocutor said that she would also help, and Professor Roger agreed and thanked them. After a while he sat in his office and thought about the assistants. There were thoughts that they received additional pay and tutoring, so that even new professors have about 6 of them. Some assistants study magic under the guidance of their professor instead of their main training, so he thought that this was usually a 21st century university. He, in turn, of course, doesn't mind getting rid of small tasks, but who would be interesting for him to choose? Although, if you think about it, then he has a list. After these thoughts, he immediately reached for it. Then I began to gradually consider the list of candidates, and realized that this was not an urgent matter after all. After a short period of time, he noticed one of the candidates who attracted him, so he thought maybe he should choose her. Now the hero was heading through the corridors of the academy and going about his business. Something, or rather someone, attracted his attention because he realized that you were now spying on him. The man told Sylvia that if she had questions, she should just come out and ask. She was hiding around the corner, and hesitated a little, but said that she was doing it now. She immediately apologized to him, and said that he was passing by, and she just thought she would like to talk to him. Machiavelli drew attention to her and thought that this is not so, and students just don't pursue their professor. So does she really have nothing to do? While he was thinking about this situation, he looked at a detail that caught his attention. So the girl turned around and said that everything was fine, because he just wanted to ask you something. The interlocutor was surprised and asked if it was her. The professor asked if she had classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 10 to 12 o'clock. Sylvia asked if that was not his class time. In this case, she definitely has time these days. And does he really want to entrust her with something? After hearing the information, the hero began to approach her, and said that this was great. Then he smiled and asked if she would be his assistant. The interlocutor was simply dumbfounded and could not even say a word. After this question, an awkward pause hung between them, and the girl thought about it, and was also embarrassed. She couldn't believe that she had such an opportunity and hesitating, asked if he was really an assistant. But what was he saying? After all, how can someone like her even be his assistant? Machiavelli said that if he becomes her, he will be able to communicate with him calmly. Sylvia asked, but wouldn't that be suspicious? The professor noted that she shouldn't worry about it because she was on the list he was given, and that makes sense. The interlocutor said that now everything is clear to her, and Roger said that his wife next to him does not want to do this. When he does not insist, the girl became more wary, and said of course she wants to. The teacher asked whether she agreed or not, but if yes, then that's great, because within 2 days she should bring him documents about registering an assistant. Sylvia immediately agreed to this. The main character as a result of this thought that this was wonderful, because it was quite good for the first assistant. Now it will be much easier for her to know about the Black Dawn, and 2 days later the man has faithful assistants for small errands, and now an hour is passed. An inspired girl came to him with a document stating that she would be his assistant, and immediately handed it over. Machiavelli, after seeing her with the document, was a little dumbfounded, because he did not expect it to be so fast. But still he said that she really did well. The little girl thanked him. He thought that the assistant appeared faster than he even expected. A little over an hour passed, she had already brought the document. It was surprising. There were a lot of people in the audience as always, and each of them was talking to each other, creating noise. Renee sat with the princess, and said that it was quite noisy today, and the girl answered her that there was just a strange rumor going around among the students, and this rumor that Professor Roger was looking for assistants. The neighbor was surprised and said that it was really tempting. Adriana said that what is much more interesting is that he had not taken anyone before, which is why everyone thinks that he did not know about their existence at all. The interlocutor asked, "How come this is a professor?" The aristocrat interrupted her, and said that the most interesting rumors about this. Renee was surprised, and her friend said that we are talking about a universal stone that fulfills everyone's wishes, so they say that it is hidden somewhere in Theon's academy. The girl asked whether this could even exist in nature. The interlocutor replied, "Of course, and there are still many unsolved mysteries. This very place is the heart of Theon's magic." Perhaps she is exaggerating, but there is probably even some kind of artifact for this. Renee said that everything was clear to her now, and they continued their discussion. On the top row sat a girl who heard them and thought it was very childish. It turned out that it was Flora, and she was really sincerely surprised by the stories about the Universal Stone, because she thought that the authorities would have already appropriated it if there was one. But in any case, we can say that this Superman is recruiting assistants, and this also surprises her. Assistants in turn are students who receive payment from the professor. Naturally, only talented people like her are suitable for this. So she proudly straightened her hair, and thought that she would definitely be able to pass if she was highly recommended. Suddenly, the students began to say that the professor was coming, so everyone should be quiet. Flora was surprised by the situation. Suddenly, the students began to say who it was. They had never seen this student, and did she really have material for classes in her hands? If so, then perhaps she was Professor Roger's assistant. When the girl saw her, she was very surprised and wondered what was going on. Had he really already chosen an assistant? Machiavelli also your audience, and told Sylvia that this is a good job so she can already go. She responded positively. Next, the main character drew attention to the students who looked at him in surprise and did not understand what was wrong with their faces. After this, it was said that everyone should be more attentive because they were starting a lesson. After a while it was already coming to an end, and the professor said that that's all for today. Today's material will be on the exam, so don't forget, let them look at it. One of the students turned to the professor and said that she had a question. The hero noticed her and asked Julia Plumhart what interests her. The girl was surprised and said that he even remembers her name. Machiavelli thought that it was she who took first place at the reception ceremony and heard that she was also supported by a magic tower. Therefore, she asked what kind of question she had. Julia replied that it was not that important, and was interested in how he chose his assistant. The professor was actually surprised by this question and did not expect to hear it, so it was not clear why she was interested. But in response to this question, he said that he had chosen her himself. The girl asked if there were any conditions, for example, the highest magical skills, or perhaps he needed a recognizable personality for this matter. At that moment her smile was quite sly. Roger looked at her carefully, and for him it was again surprising, because it was definitely not a question out of pure curiosity. Despite all this, he decided to answer, and said that he only looks at one thing when choosing his own assistant. This very factor is the character of a person, but if she has the proper character, then we can easily pass the interview. Then it's cold. He said that in any case, after her question, she might not even visit him, because now he definitely doesn't think that she can become his assistant if she tries to do this. Then the professor turned around and said that if there were no more questions then he would go. In addition to all this, their first exam is very soon, so they ask you to prepare well for it. The man slowly left the audience, and was about to go about his business. And when I did this, I turned my attention to the side because a person I knew was leaving there. His assistant was there, and he asked if she had really betrayed him here all the time. The girl hesitated about the hero, said that next time she should wait for him in the office. She agreed and wanted to say something else but could not find the right words. Machiavelli saw this and asked what happened. Sylvia replied that she didn't want to say anything like that, and that the professor just did a good job today. He noticed that this was so, and she also did a good job. Then he handed over the documents, and said that this was the task that was given for today. Let her take care of them until the end of the day. The assistant accepted them and said that of course. After this, the professor was about to go to his office, but suddenly he heard someone address him from behind. Therefore, he turned his attention there and saw that Flora was behind him, who wanted to talk to him. He again called her full name, and asked what happened. The girl hesitated a little and then said that she had heard that he had chosen an assistant. The hero replied that this was so, which she really wanted to become one too. The interlocutor became very tense at that moment, and shouted that, of course, no. Because why did she need this? Roger then asked in that case what she wanted from him. Flora turned her head away and didn't know what to say, further stating that she would like to say thank you to him, because it turns out that he saved her that very time when she could not control the energy, and does not think that the advice he gave her was bad. The man responded to this by saying that he just did what a professor should do. It was enough for him that she took his words seriously, and took him seriously. The girl asked if he really felt bad then, because he probably used more magical power than she did. Roger replied that he was completely fine, and I thought that, to tell the truth, I almost died. Flora asked the professor how many elements he could control, because in class, she noticed that he controlled 5. Machiavelli replied that those 5 were really the only ones he could control. He understood that he could actually use all 10 elements, but there was absolutely nothing to be happy about, including magicians focused on one element. Failing to use any element before reaching a certain level is mediocre. But if they find out about this, he will be in trouble, because he will simply say about 5. The student said that if we talk about such a number, then this is quite a lot. And the teacher said that if she had no questions left, then he would just go. She, in turn, did not want to let him go and wanted to say something. Machiavelli interrupted her and noted that if she still changed her mind, she could apply to become his assistant, and he is sure that he will definitely become his own. Flora was surprised when she heard this information. After these words, the main character did not wait for her to tell her. He simply slowly left from there. The student remained in that very place, and also could not squeeze out a word after hearing the information. Then she lowered her hands and clenched her fists quite tightly and said that it was annoying. Professor Roger was heading towards the main office of this academy, and when he went inside, he asked the rector if he understood correctly that she was calling him. The woman sat, smiling as always, and said that she greeted the professor, and then asked if he had heard about the recent rumors that were spreading, namely about those rumors that say that the Universal Stone is hidden somewhere in their academy. The man noted that naturally, he had heard about them, but he thought these were false rumors spread by the students themselves. The woman in turn stunned him with the answer that this was all not true, and he was surprised. Then she showed a stone in her hand and said that the universal stone, which fulfills wishes, actually exists. It is a mysterious item that has unique powers and has existed for a long time. Machiavelli drew attention to him and said that this was a relic. Jessica replied that this was exactly the case. It turns out that this is the same ancient relic of unknown origin, the power of which is hundreds of times greater than the power of artifacts created by great magicians. The main character, after hearing the information and asked if there really was such a relic in Theon, the woman replied that it was so, and they had owned it for quite a long time. The facial expressions on her face changed, and she said that it was still a strict secret. But since there are rumors, it means that information about it leaked out somewhere. The man noticed that someone had revealed the secret. The director said that perhaps this was so, but there were other options. Since the universe stone is strong, it needs constant maintenance for the area where it is stored. Information may have been leaked when the stone was being transported during maintenance. In the end, since this rumor is so special, she would like to know whether the professor could handle it or not. Machiavelli immediately drew attention to her and began to reflect on this situation. Thoughts appeared in her head about who from the outside it seems that the rector trusts, and entrusts this to him, but she doesn't really trust him just because he is in her faction. So the man thinks that she is trying to find out who is behind him and does this in various ways. Jessica told him to let her know if they noticed anything suspicious, or if he asked her to help them with the next transportation of the relic. Machiavelli said that he agreed and asked whether any of the professors were involved in this or not. The woman replied that yes, but they were assigned to different areas. The hero replied that everything was clear to him now. The woman said that there was still time before the stone was transported, so she asked him to behave as usual. After some time the man sat in his office and thought that information had leaked to Theon Academy. Therefore, he wonders if the Black Dawn has really begun to act, but Sylvia has not contacted him, and this is then strange. He, of course, does not know whether everything is wrong because of the First Order, or whether there is another reason for this. But it is clear that an incident may happen soon. So, besides this, there is something else. While the man was thinking about this, he reached into his inner pocket. From there I took out some little thing and looking at it I thought about a relic. Although I didn't even think about finding one here. Machiavelli in turn constantly changed his identity during his travels. Once he was a mercenary whom everyone knew. Also for another identity, he used a criminal advisor and more recently was a merchant. Therefore, it turns out that he did not just wander around the world with so many personalities. All this was done in order to find the missing part of this relic. So he is in this place only because of rumors that there is a relic in the Empire. But he did not think that there would be one in Theon. Of course, matter can indicate that this relic is different from the one he is always looking for, and perhaps he should use the universe stone to find the one he needs. The man's thoughts were interrupted by the communication sphere, which lit up, and it was clear that someone wanted to contact him. Hans was on the other end. He immediately said that he found out everything. It turns out that the hero dealt with the last group, but the other three organizations fell silent. But now we will talk about Piranhas. He needs help, so does he have time? The hero said that he thinks he can help in a week. The comrade asked what really happened. In response to this, I heard that Orlik had appeared in Theon. The comrade said that he had so many events, and was it really serious? Machiavelli replied that he agreed. Hans then asked seriously which school could the relic be. Perhaps the rector has a secret dungeon, the man said to stop talking nonsense. The comrade said that he didn't even understand jokes, and noted that he would still look for a time to meet. Machiavelli in turn agreed to this. Then I thought that he, of course, would like to go right away, but for now he would not hesitate because of the rector's orders. Thoughts about the universal stone that grants wishes were just spinning in my head. And perhaps this is a great chance to act now. The relic is quite difficult to find, and even he is an avid seeker of these religions, and has only found 3 so far. Judging by the size of the reforma he is holding in his hands, it can be said that there are 4 pieces left, so he will complete his relic when he finds all 7 pieces. In the end, if all this really happens, then he knows what will happen. And after I thought about it, thoughts about the situation immediately popped up in my head. He sat with his head bowed at his desk and spent a long time there. The subordinate asked if the princess needed anything else in response to which she said no, and he could leave. The interlocutor noticed that he understood everything and left. The girl was left alone and thought that she was very tired. It turns out that they all cannot leave her alone even for an hour. But everyone is to blame for her status and how she wants to live a normal student life. Suddenly her thoughts were interrupted by the door, which opened and a subordinate went there again. Adriana drew attention to him and asked what happened. The interlocutor told the princess that someone was asking to meet with her. The girl was surprised but headed there. And on the other end of the communication device was the commander of the National Security Agency, the woman knelt and offered her deepest apologies. She said that she would return for such a late meeting before the princess, but this was an urgent matter. The girl replied that everything was in order and asked what happened. The interlocutor noted that she had recently heard about werewolves in Thien and was so interested in whether it was true. The girl replied that it was true. One of the professors had already dealt with them. The agent said that she was investigating a case related to this. Adriana asked what exactly this case was. The woman apologized and said that it was being kept secret. She, in turn, is going to meet with this very professor, so does she happen to know who he is? The commander said that it was about the new Professor Roger Silasai. Adriana hopes that she will make progress in her investigation. The woman thanked her and turned again. The girl asked what was required of her. The interlocutor immediately replied that the first princess conveyed information that she wanted to contact her. She is saddened by the fact that Usha has not been in touch with her lately. Adriana did not like it, but she said that she understood everything. The agent noticed that this was where their connection ended, because she found out everything and said everything. A few moments later the connection was interrupted, and after this happened the girl breathed a sigh of relief. After that, she thought that she guessed how she was doing. It turns out that she conveyed the information through the woman, and probably her sister wanted to show that she had not forgotten about her. But because of this, she was very uncomfortable. The subordinate asked the head what happened. She replied that it was working out. The new professor took care of it. In this case, she needs to meet with this professor, so she asked about Annie how the investigation was going at the plant. The girl began to report that she looked at some pieces of the document that were not completely burned. It looked like something was being developed or researched there. In any case, it is impossible to find out the details. The boss said that they cannot continue to work with this, and is there anything else or not? The interlocutor noted that there is one more point. We are talking about a Black Dawn, because the Scarlet Group recently disappeared in Lezervelka. The woman asked if this is really what we are talking about. Also wondering if this was relevant, Annie said no, but they should take that into account as well. Jessica said that this is not true because everything is fine, and there is no need to worry about it so much. They would rather focus on their own investigation. The subordinates should check Laserwell a little more, and then they will go to Thien. The girl replied that she understood everything. And then a new day came, in which the main character continued to do his business as a professor. He drew something on the board and at the same time thought that over the past few days, many different rumors had spread. It turns out that students can move like during the werewolf incident. Because of this, we can say that there will be even more problems. Suddenly, the man turned his attention to the students' workspaces, because something attracted him. Usually they all sat cheerful and inspired, but now when he looked, he saw that they were sleepy and tired. And just to attract their attention he immediately hit quite hard, but on the table. Then he asked them if they were really bored, but in that case he would show them something fun. They were a little surprised, but the main character used his magic and summoned the element of fire right on the tip of his finger. Then immediately said that magicians always manifest magic, using themselves as the core. All this happens only because the magical power comes from the caster himself, but at the same time everything is not so simple at all. The man looked at the students again and saw that one of them was sleeping, so he stopped using his element, and a few moments later, he sent it straight towards that student who was sleeping peacefully. The guy woke up when he saw a fire in front of him, and immediately became very wary. But the main character continued to say that if they touch him, they can do the same too. It turns out that he said that magic manifests itself using the caster as the core, but in reality there are small spaces between it. Normally, about 1 meter is the limit, but if they find out that the use of their magical power can increase, they will go even further. He calls this system of spells the formula for assigning coordinates. The students were discouraged, and Clara wondered what kind of formula for assigning coordinates was, because she had never even heard of it. After this, it was completely unclear to her where the hell he had mastered such magic, so it was clearly visible that she was offended. The main character continued to talk about his subject, and then asked if they were really interested in it. Of course, this is just a small modification for the manifestation of magic. He turns out that one inspired magician invented this, but the man is not going to teach them everything. Now the students were even more surprised and asked each other why it was so incomprehensible, why he was telling them about it. Roger continued to say that he, in turn, wanted them to understand something, because magic develops from a solid foundation, and the full emergence comes only after that. To use magic correctly, they must learn everything step by step, even if they are bored, or think that he is saying obvious things. In any case, for their future they should do this. He soon offered to finish the lesson for today. But if they understand this magic, they can come to his office at any time. In this case, he would actually appreciate their efforts. Machiavelli after a while went to his offices, where they were already waiting for him. There was a subordinate who wanted to talk to him and approach him, but the main character noticed that the communication sphere was calling him. So I went to her and told the girl to stand outside for a while. She was a little surprised, but of course agreed to it. In order to play it safe between his conversations, the man used technology and isolated the space so that no one could hear him. After that, he sat down at the table and thought that it was time to contact someone who wanted to talk to him, so he contacted the director. The woman immediately told Professor Roger that all this was urgent, and he was even a little surprised. Elizabeth reported that the universe stone had been stolen. When the man heard this information, he was discouraged. The woman continued to say that she had underestimated her enemies too much. Machiavelli wondered what really happened. The interlocutor responded to this by saying that they knew about the spare storage for the stone, so they attacked them at a time when they were not ready. Despite all the rumors, she thought that everything would be fine, and they would quickly deal with this matter. But this was a cardinal mistake for her. At the moment, the Academy is pursuing them, and if they use the power of the stone, the situation will only get worse. The professor noted that, of course, he understands this. Then he asked how much time she thought they actually had. Director replied that the time was until midnight today. The man noted that now he understood everything, and Elizabeth asked if perhaps something was bothering him. The hero replied that he thought it would be better if he did not get busy with work. At the same time, one should not ask unnecessary questions. The woman said that in this case she puts it on him, and their communication session was interrupted. Then Machiavelli touched the noise-suppressing wall and thought that he knew that this would happen, but did not think that it would happen so soon. If we talk about those same guys, then it's not clear what they are thinking about. It turns out that he has not yet gotten rid of the rector's suspicions, and perhaps she considers him one of them. At this point, the professor can say something is definitely wrong, this situation is strange, and whether this is definitely the First Order. In this case, you need to think carefully. At this point, the man turned to Sylvia and said that she could come in. The casual girl was waiting for him near the front door, and when he heard him, she immediately entered and was delighted. Roger said that now it looks like the subordinates acted of their own free will. Sylvia lowered her head down, as if you understood that she was to blame, and said that everything was true. The man looked at her with a cold gaze and told her to explain from the very beginning what exactly happened in detail. The girl said, according to the investigation, it all started with the Third Order requesting information. While researching information about Thien, they found a document, but he belonged to the Universal Stone. By coincidence, rumors about the stone began to spread among students, and he believed the rumors, since he had already seen this information. Immediately after this, he learned about the existence and location of the stone. The Third Order soon told the Second about it, and he in turn decided not to tell about it. That is why they began to act on their own. This man's name is Jason. He has connections with the government, and is also responsible for all matters in the Second Order. The hero listened and noticed that if everything was so serious, he would definitely let the First Order know about it. So did that man really think that he wouldn't find out? In this situation the question arises, why is he doing this? The girl hesitantly answered that this was just her opinion, but she, in turn, thinks that she wants to take a place in the First Order. The Zero Order said that the 7 places of the First Order can always change one after another. Compared to his greed, Jason was not talented enough, so perhaps because of this he wanted to do something big. The professor listened to the information and said that he understood everything and was interested in how things were now. The girl was embarrassed and asked if she really planned to act on her own. Roger replied that she understood correctly, and they were already in pursuit of him. Their identities would eventually be revealed if they got in the way. Sylvia further said that he and his accomplices are now on the run after stealing the stone, but she only knows that they went towards a quiet forest. The man stood up and said that he understood everything, and it was time for him to start acting too. The assistant asked what she should do now. The main characters replied that she did not need to do anything. The girl was surprised. He continued to say that she had already done the work, telling him all the necessary information. So he thanked her for a job well done, but he could handle the rest himself and headed towards the exit. After hearing the words, Sylvia, as always, was embarrassed and wanted to say, thank you. But again, she could not squeeze it out of herself. Machiavelli in turn slowly left the office in which he was talking with his assistant. When I went out there, I immediately thought that I had just thanked her, so I don't understand why she was so embarrassed. He in turn felt that this was excessive devotion to the First Order, but it seems that she has personal reasons for this. The man walked forward and thought that now this is not so important, because he should take care of something else. Therefore, he concentrated his power and uttered the words, Atir Nocturnes. This was done in order to use the spell. Soon, Dark streams of energy began to surround him, and spread out as if covering him in a sphere. So a few moments after the incident, his body was completely hidden in the darkness. It was already quite dark outside at that moment, and the night was taking everything into its domain. And the main character appeared from the darkness, and the spell that he used is summoning magic, better known as magic passage. Of course, we can say that it uses a huge amount of magical power, but in return, it completely hides the presence of the caster. Only because of this no one will be able to see or find him. The man was completely sure that no one could see him and calmly walked near Flora. The girl, who was walking out and talking with her neighbor at ease, suddenly felt something strange around her. That's why she became wary and immediately turned her attention to the side. The interlocutor, who was walking with her, asked what had happened. At the same time the friend only looked forward and did not see anyone there, but thought that someone had just passed by her, but she did not see him. But felt magic. It turns out that it was the magic of invisibility. And if this is so, then she should check. The neighbor asked her where she was running away. Several men stood near the gate, and one of them said that he would think about it. Only they went into the quiet forest. But if this was the case, then perhaps they should better take more people with them. The old people were interested in why such a forest still existed in general, because there were attempts to get rid of it. At that moment there was already a hero near them who was hiding. The man said that in any case, no matter what they did, the forest quickly recovered. But the people entering there went crazy. That's all. Blocking the entrance is the best they can do now. Somewhere in this forest some strange sounds were heard. Those whom the main character was looking for at that time were there. The younger one grabbed his head and made those sounds, and his body was shaking. The man told him to come to his senses. It was not clear whether he really wanted to go crazy like that guy. The second man turned to Sir Jason and asked what they should do now. It turns out that they are now surrounded, and they cannot hold out here for long. The man was aggressive and shouted at him to cover his mouth because he has a plan. The interlocutor saw that he looked somehow strange and acted the same way, so they all became wary. But the man was holding a stone in his hands and thought that they said that this was the universal stone, but this piece was absolutely useless. He in turn can say that this is a real force, so it is not clear why it does not work, and this thing does not react to anything at all. Suddenly, those present heard that someone had approached them, and the main one asked who he was. It turned out that it was the main character who asked if these were all the scoundrels. There were at least 10 of them here, and had the rest been caught? Jason turned his attention to this very man, and was amazed when he realized who he really was. The bodies of those present began to shake, and they asked if this was the same Sir Roger in front of them. The professor stood quite imposingly and said that this was Jason from the Second Order. He was interested in what he thought, why he came here personally. The old man was discouraged and wondered how he was unlucky after all. After all, Sir Roger, known for his ruthlessness, had really come. In this case, there is a high probability that he will die like this, so he was wary, holding the green stone in his hands. Then all the men fell to their knees and holding out the relic said that it is called the Universal Stone, so the second number wants to offer it to the First Order. The main character turned his attention to this pebble and began to closely study it with his own eyes. Immediately he reached out with his hand and then said that this was a really good job. But now he says goodbye to Jason. The interlocutor was amazed at the information he heard and asked what he meant. The main characters in turn naturally did not answer him and, touching the stone, immediately used their power, so that they pierced all these men through. The Second Order felt that he was dying and asked what it was. He did not understand why this happened. The picture before his eyes began to disappear and blur, and the stone was no longer in his hands. Roger took it into his hands and began to examine it carefully. And after that she said that if we talk about why all this happened, then he doesn't want to waste time on an explanation. The man continued to look at the relic in his hands for some time, and thought that this was the Universal Stone itself. But after a short period of time, something strange caught his attention and his gaze sharpened. Feeling suggested that he should not rush, because what was in his hands was definitely not a relic. There is an incredible amount of magical power there, but no more. Although the rector had previously told him that it was indeed a relic, the main characters became wary at that moment, and a few moments later felt something strange around. Then he turned his attention to the sky, and there appeared some kind of bright flash from which circles diverged. From the magic ball that hovered there, a beam shot out that was directed downwards. As one could see with the naked eye, it was a huge force that was going to hit the place where the main character was. So, after using this attack, a huge explosion occurred, and a blast wave spread over several kilometers around. At the same time, the explosion also formed a huge crater, and only luminous petals fell down. In the very center, right on the ground, lay the very stone that the rector had previously said was a relic. After everything that happened, someone slowly started to land right towards him. He was a woman who bent down to pick it up, and said that she shot with all her might. She didn't leave a scratch here. And it was Elizabeth, who has always smiled brightly and said that this was the end. At the same time, she currently has a fake universe stone. She thought that she really had to try so hard for this bait, so now she hopes that it will bear fruit for her. And if we talk about Professor Roger, then she wonders whether he was there at the time of the explosion or not. At the same time, the man was near the explosion site near one of the trees. At the same time, he used the very technique that hit him, and at the moment when he was there, he exhaled, because it was clear that it was damn close to killing him. Machiavelli remembered how a few moments before all this happened, he saw the attack. In order to leave the hall of the place itself as quickly as possible, he used dark energy, and thus a spell to hide himself. At that moment, as the spell was missed, the completed beam was already several meters from the epicenter of the explosion. The professor thought that the mayor's office would give him away when he used to spell, and in this very world where he was, there was no magic like teleportation. But nothing is impossible when a person uses the formula for assigning the coordinates and features of this magic. This is the power of 6th rank teacher, Elizabeth Willow. The main character saw perfectly well and did not understand why she came. But if she asked him to do it, it seems that the stolen universal stone also turned out to be a fake. Therefore, there were thoughts about whether she had revealed his identity and set a trap. Suddenly, due to the large loss of mana, the man again began to have a very bad headache. He realized that he could not get by with all the medicine, and immediately took it out of his inner pocket. Machiavelli knew that the situation was bad, because the teleportation magic had drained all his magical power, so he immediately took the medicine. After a few moments of consciousness began to return to normal again, and more came. The thoughts came that this could not be because she would not use such methods. This means that from the very beginning, this woman planned to do everything on her own. And for maximum efficiency, she hid the truth from her own allies. Now we can say that Elizabeth is a truly extraordinary person. Suddenly Roger felt that danger was coming from the side and immediately pointed the weapon there. It turned out that Flora was there, who screamed out of fear. A few moments later she came to her senses and, looking at this man in surprise, asked if it was really the professor. And the hero, in turn, was also quite surprised and asked what Flora Lumos was doing here. It was not clear to him why she was here because she must understand perfectly well that this forest is dangerous. The interlocutor immediately hesitated in response to this. Then her tone changed to aggression, and she wondered why he was here, because she was the first to ask about it. I was also wondering what kind of spell this was. The professor noted that it was none of her business, because this forest is a dangerous place for students, so let her go back. The student said that she was not so weak, and the hero thought it seems that she does not suspect anything. Perhaps she found another way to bypass those guarding the passage. Flora stood and wondered how to explain to him that she came here, feeling something strange, and did not even know that Professor Roger would be here. Suddenly, her thoughts were interrupted by another student who was following her and shouting her name. It turned out that this was the same friend who had not left her and stuck with her, but now she was lost and said that she was scared and did not understand where she had gone. The main character understood this whole situation and told the girl to follow him, because he would take her and her friend to the exit. Florida did not answer anything to this, but she understood that this situation looked quite strange. Before the professor saw her, she watched him from the side and saw how he grabbed his head, and after that he took out some medicines and took several of them, after which his tremors stopped. Flora was surprised after this, and was now wondering what kind of medicine he could have taken. Perhaps he was sick with something, and so, together with the professor, they went to where the director was. The woman saw them, and said that it was Roger himself. Suddenly, she looked to the side behind him and asked if they were two students. Machiavelli noted that they were wandering through a quiet forest. Elizabeth was surprised and said that if we talk about this place, then why were there any students there at all? Flora replied that all this happened because of her. The woman asked if this student was Lumos. The girl continued to say that she herself went into the quiet forest, but Charlotte ran after her some time later. Professor Roger found them. It was clear that the woman thought about this, and then said that it was clear now. The main character asked her what he should do with them. The interlocutor smiled and said that students often make mistakes. Let them just leave them. Then she asked what they should do now. Because of such an urgent matter, the coming should come first and sort everything out. The man told the director that it meant that the magic was from her. Since it was her, then he is sure that everything has already worked out. If everything was like that, then in that case, he would send these two students back. Elizabeth said that everything was true, and let him be kind enough to do it. After a while, she and the old man walked along the corridor of the academy, and he asked, if we talk about Roger Kalichi, then how is he to her? The woman replied that because of this event, she thought she could put aside all suspicions because she studied his reaction and did not notice anything strange. Willow smiled after hearing the information and said that it was such a relief because there was no one like him anymore. But everything was not so simple. He wonders why they spread the rumor in this case. Elizabeth smiled when she heard this. Then she raised her head up and said that they had to do this so that all the small rats would peck first. The old man heard this information and said that now everything is very clear to him. After that, together with the rector, they continued to move forward. So very soon we arrived at the stand on which the universal stone stood. The woman looked at it and said that the real one had been safely transported. Thank God that nothing happened to it. Because in the past, this stone destroyed an entire kingdom because it was in danger. Now that they know that they are truly safe, they can leave. And she doesn't want to stay here for long. Soon the door to this room closed and they left, but the dark shadow was already there. The main character used this technique of the young man, and when he realized that everyone had left, he immediately appeared here. The man turned his attention forward to that same stand and thought that at first he didn't believe it. But now it was definitely a jackpot. Of course, it was good enough that she left a mark on that same fake stone, and thought that the rector would decide to check the real one. As a result, the release of the magical power of the real stone is much higher than that one. In fact, it is even sucking it out by force now. But even so he does not have the power to fulfill his true desire. The hero began to come closer and said that he knew this perfectly well, because he had seen a lot of things and there was a limit to his strength. Finally, touched this universal stone and thought that in any case, at least he was able to tell him about the location of the remaining relics. In order to do this, Roger touched that very stone and made a manipulation. As what happened in the room, the man realized that more magical power was accumulating, so it was definitely trying to invade his consciousness. Because the hero understood this perfectly well, he told this very pebble not to twitch. Otherwise, if he tries to get into his consciousness, regardless of his desire, he will break. The bright light continued to be directed towards his streams of energy. But after a few moments it stopped, and the hero said that it was good. After he calmed the stone in his hand a little, he told him to now show him the location of the remaining pieces. After some time all this ended and the stone stopped glowing. The hero said that he knew it. He would not tell him about all the pieces. But even the information he received so far is good. After all, he could not even imagine that one of the very fragments he was looking for was so close. Soon Machiavelli returned home and received an appeal from his friend Hans, who asked what had happened. From fatigue, the man literally lay on the table and said that he had done what he had recently said, but asked to reschedule the meeting until tomorrow night. The friend replied that this was for the best. Otherwise, the deadlines were already running out, and it was unclear what had gone wrong with his voice or something went wrong. The professor noted that everything went exactly as it should. They in turn found the location of one relic, and it is difficult for the hero to recover due to constant work. Hans said that all this is understandable. So many events have happened, but if we talk about only one relic, then it is not worth it. Roger said that to be more precise, there are two of them, but one of them is already known. The other is located in the direct city of Larisvilk, where he is now. His comrade was surprised when he heard this. And the hero continued to say that according to the image that he was shown of the relic, he believes that it is in the auction house. Hans noticed that this means that we are talking about the Konst auction house. It is the only one in the area, and the guy heard that something big will happen there soon. Machiavelli said that maybe it would be an auction item. He should look at the list of items prepared for the auction and see if he would do an interesting job. Suddenly, he said that it wasn't difficult, and then they would meet tomorrow. The hero agreed to this and said, "See you." After some time, a new day had already arrived, and the main character was slowly walking through the academy. There he saw Flora standing in front of the door, and asked what she was doing in front of his office. The girl was scared when she saw him and asked if he was really inside the office. The man was so interested in why she was looking for him. The student immediately thought that she didn't know where to start the conversation. The first thing that came to her mind was to ask about the special magic that he used. Well, or you should ask about the very medicine that she saw, although it is quite difficult for her to ask everyone about this. There was an awkward pause between them, and the hero then said that if she had nothing to say, then he would leave. The interlocutor realized that there would be no other way out, and asked to wait. The hero noted what had happened, because if it was something unimportant, then let him remain silent. And when he turned his head to the side, he was surprised, because he saw that the element of water was floating in the air in front of him. There were also various other elements that the girl created. With a smile on her face, she immediately asked what he thought about this, about her form of assigning coordinates specifically. The man looked at them carefully, and then said that she really surprised him. He, in turn, did not think that there were already students capable of mastering the formulas. Flora proudly raised her head and began to say that she was simply original. She was the only one among the students who succeeded, so perhaps she should be rewarded. The man thought for a few moments, and then said that this is true, but for such a thing, perhaps he should give the highest score. And what does she think about this? The girl replied that this was just a number, and it was not worth her effort. In the end, she would like to get something else of similar value to the highest score. Machiavelli was surprised by her request and looked at her carefully for some time. Then he decided what he would do, and opening the door to his office, told her to come in with him. Naturally, the student entered and immediately began to examine this room from the inside, because she understood that it was her first time in his office. The professor began to say that the research laboratory was located in this direction. The girl asked what kind of research laboratory it was. After that, the man led her to the door and opening the room. She saw that same laboratory. I immediately took a closer look and wondered what the hell he was researching here. It turns out that I had never seen such a pattern before. It doesn't look like these are all simple drawings. The hero said that, to be honest, he didn't expect her to be able to do this. As a result, she even had to think about a worthy reward. As she knows, assigning coordinates is a mathematical formula, and it is also the principle of managing mana in one coordinate, and also the use of a formula in it. Flora thought that she just copied what she saw, and this is how it works. So the professor said that he would show her something else. Since she managed to learn this to repeat, then she needs a reward. After that, he raised his wand and prepared to do the spell. The student carefully watched what was happening, and a clear trace of magic appeared in the air. This spell was never completed. She was simply in a stupor and did not understand what it was. Some kind of magical spiral appeared in the air, which was more like matter. The girl felt severe discomfort, and understood that her head was about to crack, so it was unclear what this sensation was. After what happened, some time passed. Flora gradually began to open her eyes and was still in a bad state. The main character heard her get up and asked if she woke up. The girl was very surprised at that moment, and asked how much time had passed. The professor said that it was about 30 minutes. A student asked us what kind of general magic this was just recently. Machiavelli said that he called this technique the Klein bottle, and he ended up seeing it one day and just decided to repeat it. And he did it just for the sake of an experiment. The girl asked if he really created only this for the sake of an experiment. Roger said that he should forget everything he said, and was interested in how her nose and eyes were. The interlocutor was surprised and asked what he was saying because she didn't understand why. The hero immediately looked at her, and said that she had the ability to sense all the features of manifested Maya. At the same time, when she saw his formula, her pupils dilated and her fingertips trembled, so she felt the form differently. The most ordinary people cannot do this, and she must have been shocked by the magic, which she had never seen before. The girl asked if the professor was not interested in this. Now she is talking about her ability. Roger replied that this is not at all wrong because he is not interested in abilities. Although other magicians in turn may think differently, and it is better for her not to get caught with this. It's getting late enough now that she should leave. The student heard these words and stood up slowly and left the room. After that, she recovered at the front door and thought that it was unclear how he could be so calm after he recognized her ability. Or he had already met here with a similar ability like hers, and in general he rewarded her properly. After some time, the hero went to his comrade and said that everyone would never get used to his stylish appearance. The guy noticed him and asked if he had really come. Now he was wondering if he was still going to go there. The hero responded positively, and said that it was as usual. But then he asked where he got such a car from. The interlocutor said that he received it from the best of the best among society. And just like that, they are coming, which is the best place to do something like this. Machiavelli looked at his appearance, and said that it suits him. In this case we should already leave, and they both headed to the car. In the very place where they were supposed to be, it was quite loud and a large number of aristocrats had gathered. The professor walked slowly and said that it was too noisy and also bright here. The comrade noticed that after all this was a famous place. But is it worse than some dirty place? The man asked what floor the meeting place was on. Hans said it was on the 4th and asked her to fetch him. And when they tried to climb the stairs, the guards stopped them and asked where to wait, since they could not go to the 4th floor without permission. The guy handed over several pieces of paper and said that they could do anything. Naturally the guard accepted them, and then slowly walked away and told them to pass. And the main character after that said that the atmosphere on the 4th floor is really different. Hans said that he heard this place was used for meetings of underground organizations. As a result, in this way they created an unwritten rule. The man asked what kind of rule it was, and the interlocutor replied that he was saying that fighting on the 4th floor is prohibited, which is why there are no security guards on it. Machiavelli said that he was completely sure there was a reason why they invited them to such a place. perhaps to see if they would follow this rule. The partners walked along this floor for some time, and suddenly Hans said that they should go here. The hero drew attention to that very door and said that it was time to enter in this case. The woman inside said that it was James Moriarty. She, in turn, is completely sure that he would not lie in such a place. She thought that he disappeared after an unsuccessful attempt to start a war in the kingdom of Delica. But now I wonder why he came here. Is he really planning to correct his mistakes? Her name is Violetta. And she is a black rose. The main character took a sip of wine and said that, of course not, what kind of nonsense is this? Because he could not even think about such a thing. The interlocutor noted that in any case, she could not trust him. Because how could a person without evil intentions destroy the Scarlet Group as soon as it appeared here? Machiavel in response to this said that he just wanted to get rid of the dirt that was in front of his eyes. The man said that enough personal conversations, and what he wanted in general. It was not for nothing that he accepted their invitation, and this was said by Luke from the Caracas group. The hero said that he thinks quickly, and he plans to increase his strength. The interlocutor asked what other force he had. Did he really want to create a second Scarlet Group? And the group's people were also sitting in the room. Old children, old man Dave. Roger said of course not, because he was wondering why it had become so stuffy here. And in that case, he would clarify all the misunderstandings right now. The old man asked what kind of misunderstanding he was talking about. The hero didn't listen to him, and said that there was something else before that. Because he wants to talk in person, Dave asked what he was talking about, but the little girl interrupted him and said that everything was fine. After all, it turns out that Moriarty understood everything. In ordinary cases they look down on her because she is a child. It was a member of the group of old children Stella. The hero smiled and said that he wasn't stupid enough to look down on her because she was a child, and besides, she shouldn't worry. Because now he has no desire to create a second Scarlet Group, but he plans to create his own business. So right now he wants to offer it to them. He gives them a job and they will rake in a lot of money. Comrade, at that moment it would have been well, and I would not have understood what he was talking about at all. Violet said that this was no different from the Scarlet Group, in which case would he really force them to obey his orders? The man said that this is not so, because this is just a proposal, because if he wanted it, he would have started doing it a long time ago. He will also give them part of the Scarlet Group's business site even if they refuse his offer. Everyone was surprised, and the girl asked how he could give it away, even if he didn't refuse. Now she definitely doesn't understand what he's even up to. Machiavelli said that they probably already know that now it is dangerous for him to act openly. He needs his personal loyal forces, but useless battles will not give anything. They do not need to trust him. Even if he refuses, he will not lose anything. But the hero wants to get an answer here and now. After this proposal about the room, there was an awkward pause and everyone was thinking about what to do. Luke told this guy that maybe he would at least tell him what exactly this business was. Violet screamed at him why he was deciding without getting burned by it with them. The old man said that he didn't really want to interfere in a dangerous matter, and he himself must understand this. The hero reached out to his comrade and said that he promised there would be no dangers. They should know well what pleasures they are looking for. The interlocutor noted that this is probably music and opera, even if he doesn't tell them to do it. The man said that this is not so, and he will need more elegance from them, or rather telling a story through play, music and dance. Luke looked at the documents, and said that he didn't even know, but he was sure that he saw a future in this, so he suggested doing it. The hero replied that then he was looking forward to working with this leader. Violetta said that everything was interesting, and asked Moriarty what he wanted to get in the end. Roger said that he wants change. This is a forgotten area, and even despite the local industry and blacksmiths, only gray skies and a bleak future await him. After all, they maintain a clear sky above people's heads. The man wants to change this dark and gloomy alley into a place where people can live and see a bright future. He also presented this business idea to other organizations, so he asks everyone to familiarize themselves with this proposal before making a decision. The meeting ended, and Hans told the hero that his ideas were incredible to think that he received the approval of all three organizations. Machiavelli said that he just brought other people's ideas to life, but it was best for them to cover this topic. Suddenly, he heard that someone was asleep and asked if she wanted anything. He also asked why she was here on a company. It was Violetta who said that they should talk in private. The man told his friend to walk, and he would catch up with him later. The guy noticed that he should not rush. And so the woman told about the business to whom he proposed whether he really thought it would do well. The hero asked if she thought otherwise. The leader of the Black Rose replied that the current clothing market is controlled by the mines and rich merchants. She wondered if she really had a chance of doing so. The man responded to this by saying that their target audience is not them at all. and their goal is light and comfortable clothing that people can use in everyday life. In the end, if they like this idea of it, everyone will turn away from fashion, the interlocutor said. Yet they cannot shy away from trying to stop them. Roger said she needed to get over it, and she couldn't hide forever. Plus she didn't have to worry about protecting her sisters anymore. If she accepted his offer, he would be responsible for protecting them. And once her business was established, she could work her magic on fashion as well. Violetta was amazed and asked how he knew. The man replied that magicians can recognize other magicians, and it's not something complicated there. The leader of the group said that since she agreed to work with him, she could no longer hide it. Then the woman took off the dark veil that was on her face and a burn appeared from there. The hero then turned his attention and said that this was a burn caused by magic. Violetta replied that this was so. These were the tricks of a magician who thought it was his property. She noticed this too late, so even the healer's apostles of laments were powerless. And that's how the woman showed him her disgusting appearance. So, perhaps she will put it back on when she wanted to do this. Hero grabbed her hand and asked her to wait. Then he came closer and said that she trusted and showed him her secret, so it would be right for him to reveal her secret. Violetta didn't understand what he was talking about, but Roger touched her burn with his finger. A few moments after the incident, he used the magic of the final burn as if it had never happened. The hero asked her to look at his face, and when the girl did, she was amazed and asked how he did it. The man smiled and said that it was just real magic. All he can say is that she is too beautiful to hide her face because of this burn. Naturally, Violetta was embarrassed when she heard such information from the opposite sex. Then she put on a veil and said that now it was dangerous to flaunt such things. The hero noticed that everything would be as she said. At the same time, the girl said that now it was time for her to get to work, as he ordered. Their meeting today was significant. Suddenly the hero felt something and shouted her name, and the interlocutor turned around and asked what happened. Machiavelli immediately grabbed it with his hand and pulled it to the side, and it flew near the head of the staff. The head of the Black Rose turned her attention there and saw that there was a metal arrow there. Sir Roger asked her if she was okay. Violetta was scared but said that it was so because he saved her. It turns out that right now there was an ambush between them, but it is unclear who did it. The man reached for his weapon, and noticed that he, of course, had suspicions. But despite this, it turns out that a whole gang is heading towards them. Suddenly, those who were going to them said that it was James Moriarty himself. It was completely unclear to them how such a big shot could wander around here without guards. It turns out that he gave him a good opportunity. The hero looked in different directions and asked if these were the remnants of the Scarlet Group. It was unclear whether they had forgotten how the group collapsed. The thug replied that he remembered everything perfectly, that's why he was prepared. But Roger smelled some strange smell. After he said that this was dispersion and told Violetta not to use magic because it would be difficult to control it, a member of the group said that he knew even that. Then, with a smile on his face, he asked to wait because this voice was familiar to him. So it was not in vain that he waited. He, in turn, did not think that they would immediately grab two big shots. The leader of the Black Rose group said that all this is annoying, using the body in battle is not her style. Roger asked if she was going to fight. The girl replied that they had been caught after all and there was nowhere to run. Next, the man asked the lady if he knew how to dance. The interlocutor noted that he could dance well enough not to bother other people. The professor took out his weapon and told her to back him up in this case. Before the village, the calm atmosphere of the area was soon disturbed by the massacre. The remnants of the Scarlet Group attacked, and the man and the girl began to defend themselves. Soon one of them said that this was bad, because even with magic they were no match for them. But the leader who brought them here said that they were already tired, so there was not much left. Violetta noticed that her strength was no longer there, because it was not the same as when she was young. Roger asked her to increase her stamina when he was not done with this crap. Then I started thinking that I couldn't find the guy you shot, so I wonder if he really hit after the ambush. He in turn uses the hard-to-reach aroma of dispersal and easily controls the soy and murderous aura. It looks like there is a professional hiding among these guys, so the man turned to Violetta. She asked what happened, but the professor ran up to her and grabbed her by the arm and began to run forward. A member of the opposing group shouted that his subordinates were thick-headed idiots. How they let them down was not clear. So let them run after them now. Violetta asked what this man was doing, and the interlocutor replied that among them there were professional killers. As a result, if they continue, then the advantage will be on their side. Suddenly, among that same crowd of men, another one appeared, who was moving quickly. This man, or rather there were two of them, had daggers in his hands, and they were heading towards the main character. The girl noticed that they were being chased and said that this was them. Roger asked if she knew who they were. Violetta replied that she heard there was a group of killers who came from the southern desert. People who kill others for money. They here wondered if they were from the southern desert, then they really were Kalisarp's killers. So he told the girl to be careful and not bite her tongue. While she was surprised, the man used his grappling hook and immediately tried to climb to the top of the roof. The pursuers in turn did not stop and also followed them closely. One of them immediately rushed to attack and threw some objects towards the people. Naturally, Violetta and her comrade in arms retreated to the side to defend themselves. She opened an umbrella, with the help of which she was able to neutralize that very blow. But after a few moments she was amazed, because she saw the probe which began to disappear as if poison had fallen on it. Machiavelli saw that his girlfriend was surprised and said that this is a special poison that the scoundrels Kalisarpa use and it corrodes absolutely everything. Violetta asked what they should do then. The hero replied, either wait until they run out of throwing knives or get out of here. The head of the Black Rose said that she liked the second option better. The man said that then he understood everything. Next, the hero again grabbed his fighting friend and told her to hold on tighter in this case. The man went down to the streets of the buildings in order to disappear quickly. The killers saw that their victims were trying to escape, so they also rushed to attack after them. In a few moments tell him they didn't look at each other in order to understand what to do, and so together they rushed down in different directions in order to accurately reach their victims. The guy was attracted by the sound from Violetta, who asked him to wait a little. Then she stood all alone downstairs and asked if he really just left her here and left her. What a coward she was. She didn't even think that he was such a person. The mercenary took out several daggers and wondered if she was really alone, and the man had run away, although this was not the case because he was unlikely to leave her. This situation before his eyes is like a trap, and he is using this woman as bait. Therefore, this person can say that he is hiding somewhere very close. The killer realized where he was and turned around to strike with his weapon, saying that he was caught. But after a few moments I saw that there was nothing in the place where his attack was. And after that, out of nowhere, the main character appeared, who easily struck with his dagger. The killer was surprised at what happened and before he died he asked how he did it. Roger smiled at this and said that it was just a feature of his magic, although he could tell that he took advantage of the scent of dispelling slightly. After these words, he immediately pulled out his own blade, and the man was finished. The hero thought that the one that remained on mana, he used it to convey sound. Suddenly, Violetta shouted that she should turn back, because there was danger from above. The man immediately raised his head there and saw another killer. At the same time, the mercenary did not just attack, he used the same hook that the hero often wields. With the same action, the opponent easily snatched the blade that Roger was holding in his hands. Continuing his attack, he soon said that he was now definitely finished. Suddenly I saw Machiavelli reach into the back of his pocket and take out another weapon. The killer was actually amazed by the situation and wondered if he was hiding another weapon. A few moments later they clashed with each other, and then one of them struck his opponent. Luckily for Roger, he was more skilled, so his opponent fell to the ground dead. After what happened, the man told him that he acted well, but at the crucial moment he let his guard down. Suddenly voices began to be heard, saying that the sound was coming from here. They should be caught, because they would be finished if they let them go. The hero said that the scent of dissipation had almost disappeared, so she asked if he could leave it to her. The girl noted that it was not that difficult. Members of the Oleg group arrived at this place, and the old man shouted that he had found these scoundrels. But a few moments after he stated this, he saw a stream of mana in front of him. Further, in the place where all these people were, a powerful explosion thundered, and only screams were heard. Finally, the situation was resolved. And Violetta said that it seemed that there were no more henchmen left. She did not think that they were setting up an ambush after the group disappeared. Machiavelli said that it turns out that they were forced to do it. The girl asked what he meant. Because he doesn't understand who could have done this, the man replied that, most likely, the killers had taken possession of him, and it was definitely not Rickson because he killed him recently. Violetta was surprised and asked if he really killed him, and if it was serious. The hero replied that everything was true. It turns out that that person was involved in dirty deeds while he was financing the group. At one time he humiliated the honor and respect of other people. Therefore, Roger does not want to exist under the same sky with such people. Since they have already talked about this, he will hand over that person's recruits to her. So let him dispose of them as he wants. The girl said that in return he needed her to find the one who was behind this. Machiavelli said that he was going to ask her about it. Violetta replied that she would be busy with the business that he offered her. The man heard this, and asked if she really couldn't handle it. The head of the Black Rose exhaled and said that he knows how to hurt her pride, in which case he will take care of it, and do it even better than he expects. The man smiled after that, and said that was great then and wished her luck. After these words they did not go their separate ways and go about their own affairs. The girl shouted to the assistant to come to her faster, but the guy was surprised and asked why he was her assistant. The interlocutor got angry and said that he, the little guy, should silently drag his ass when she calls him. Hans said that he understood everything and asked him to remove his small rat teeth. Roger drew attention to them and said that he was wondering why it was so noisy inside. The girl drew attention to him, and it was Sheridan Ironfit, Roger's colleague and developer. Also a dwarf girl, the guy shouted to the hero, calling him his brother to help him. And Machiavelli said that he looked at the name here as fun. The hero noticed the colleague that it was enough to mock this man, and it would be better to let him take a look at this. She stopped and told him to show what he has. The little girl screamed. Did he really pull the wire until he was carrying another person? She said that it was only for one person, and the clamp now doesn't work. The man made excuses, saying that he had to do this. Sheridan said that it would take 10 minutes and let the mister wait here a little. Hans stood up and asked why this little shit hated him so much. The hero thought that it was because he was a weakling. He further said that comrade do not forget that she is older than him and let him be patient when talking with her. The guy said that at the first meeting he thought that she was a child. Roger said that he probably first saw her in the mines of the kingdom of Delica. The interlocutor noted that everything was correct. She was kept there as a slave. Machiavelli remembered everything and asked if this was considered captivity. When they found a girl in the dungeons, she was sitting near the explosives and making something. Hans said that they would have died in this if the bombs had exploded. The hero noted that even the captain of the knights would have died if something like that had exploded a kilometer underground. A comrade remembers how some left-wing types pestered him. Roger replied that he had already taken care of them, and they were from the hall in the group. As a result, there had to be someone behind these people. And if a friend could find out about this, the guy scratched his head and said that this is how they deal with items at auction. Suddenly, Sheridan shouted to the assistant. Was he really lost there? The man told him to help the girl first, and let him make sure that he did not touch the gunpowder. The main character was near the window and thought that if we are talking about 10 minutes, he thinks about us that he will cope in 30, in which case he will rest for now. And when I turned my attention to the window, I was a little surprised. But what I saw there, several people in cloaks moved around and Machiavelli thought that their movements were light and fast. He did not even hear their steps. A group of people moving synchronously at such a time looks strange. And perhaps they are the ones he is thinking about. The girl who stood at the head of this group a few moments later turned her attention to where the main character stood. But at the same time she didn't see anything and just froze, and her subordinates asked the commander what happened. The interlocutor replied that it was nothing because she showed her something. The hero heard this conversation, insisted that he was already covered from the window. After that, he thought that he didn't see anything similar to him. At first it seemed that they were knights, but this silver hair reminded someone. So most likely she is the patron of the Knights of the Night Serpent Jessica Lionhall. But it was unclear why she was in Laserwell, because the hero had heard that she had been assigned to investigate the murder of Old Man Rickson. In this case, did she really decide that this murder was connected with a recent incident? It's good that he got rid of the evidence, and no longer wants to intersect with this terrible person. And then Sheridan returned and told the mister that she had everything in order. It took a little longer, so she decided to put the rest of the parts in order. The hero immediately put on his device and said that it had become smaller and thinner, and the little girl threw it out to try it out. The man immediately pointed his hook towards the wall and hit it quite hard. After what happened, he said that it became even more powerful. The developer said that he made it twice as powerful, and now he will be able to use it on several people. In addition, she added a new function and let him try to clinch his hand into a fist and bend his wrist. Machiavelli asked what another new function was. He then did what the girl asked him to do, and out came a blade. Sheridan said she did it because she remembered what he told her, and would turn back if he relaxed his hand. Also, if he sees a small hole on the left side, he can shoot needles from it to paralyze the enemy. Roger thanked and said that he liked it. The little girl noticed that he had excellent taste, but her cowardly assistant kept saying that it was dangerous. Although he can say that all this was expected from the Academy Professor Theon, the hero thought that it sounded a little strange, but that's okay. The girl said that he looks great in these clothes, and just one look is enough to understand that he is a gentleman, just like some kind of aristocrat. The hero smiled when he heard this and thanked him for his kind words. Then he said that he would still find a good use for him. The colleague asked if he was really leaving. Roger said that he wanted to take a walk and ask her for something else. Jessica said that she came here because someone caused a commotion here, but these wounds were caused by magic. Was there some kind of fight between factions? The woman took a closer look at the bodies and said that she knew one of them. He named their groups. Annie asked how this could be because the Scarlet group had been eliminated. The boss turned her attention to the side and said that there were 2 more bodies there. After that, she approached one of them and took out a knife, with which this man was killed. Sniffing it, she could smell a sour smell, so it seemed like it was a special poison that the cusp killers used. Lloyd asked if she really meant the organization of assassins from the Fatima dynasty. The girl noticed that perhaps there was a conflict between Kalpa and the Scarlet Group. Jessica said that this is not so because they did not die from poison, but most likely were on the same side. The person she considers was killed with just one blow. The guy went up to the next one and said that this one was also killed with one. The picture looks like his heart was pierced from the back. The woman said that the killer went into battle at a short distance, and most likely they thought that their opponent was an ordinary magician. In the end, these people died because of their own mistake. The one who dealt with the killers is a Mac who knows how to handle a sword, and he is also the one who put an end to the Scarlet Group. The subordinate asked why she thought so. The interlocutor replied that the collapsed organization had gone so far as to hire Kalkup's killers. This means that they had a huge grievance, I thought. If you look into it, then Rixon's finances at some point passed to the Scarlet Group. There is someone who killed this aristocrat and dealt with the group, and also a burned-out factory appeared, and also Professor Thien who burned the werewolf to the ground. The boss said that they would finish there. She was exploring to leave. The guy asked. Really now, she answered positively. Because she found out everything she needed. Lloyd asked if he understood correctly that this was the case with the investigation. Jessica replied that not yet. The guy added, but they are not even one step closer to completing the matter. If they continue like this, then everything will be wrong. The commander said that she has guesses. She has one place in mind right now where there should be a clue. Selena came to Professor Roger and greeted him, then stated that she recently heard that he did not come to work today. The man replied that everything was right. He had no classes today, but I wondered what brought her here. The interlocutor was kind and said that someone was looking for him. She in turn passed by, so she decided to drop by to see him. Roger asked who was looking for him. The woman replied that we were talking about a knight in the State Security Service. Machiavelli immediately became wary and then said that he would meet him, then after which he headed to the academy, and Lloyd greeted him. At the same time, he asked whether he understood correctly that he was Roger Salici. The interlocutor replied that yes, it was him. And then he asked, why don't they sit down to talk? The knight replied that he agreed and thanked him for this. When he sat down at the appointed place, he said that he would introduce himself. His name is Lloyd, and he is an employee of the State Security Service. The professor then asked if he would like some tea by chance. The guy thanked him, but replied that he didn't want it, because he didn't eat while working. Roger noticed that he understood everything and asked what brought him here after all. The agent asked if it was true that he dealt with the werewolf who appeared on the territory of the academy. Machiavelli replied that this was so, and were there really any problems with this? The interlocutor said no. He would just like to hear in detail what happened. A man should not worry, and let him just imagine that he is communicating with a friend. The hero replied that he understood everything. At that very moment, he thought about what it meant that it was not Jessica Lionhole, and he, in turn, had already prepared to meet her. Since it's not her, there shouldn't be any problems. Roger said that he would start then, and the guy asked him to tell the details. After a while, the meeting ended and they shook hands. The security representative thanking him for his time. The professor said that he was the one who worked for the government, so he was glad to help him. Lloyd replied that it was an honor to meet him. The man reciprocated this. When the interlocutor left, he looked at his hand for a long time. The subordinate returned to his comrades and told the commander that he had arrived. At the same time, he asked if they had found any clues. The woman replied that there was nothing worthwhile. In the end, they even got an investigation warrant, but there was nothing useful there. But what about him? She wondered if he followed her instructions exactly. Lloyd replied that he did. He did everything as she said. Jessica became more serious and remarked that in this case, could it be that he was the one who devoted a lot of his time to training? The subordinate said that although he wore gloves, when they shook hands, nothing seemed strange to him. Since it could be said that it was the hand of an ordinary magician who had never used a knife before. When the woman heard this information, she was really very surprised. They in turn also therefore asked whether he was serious when he said this, and perhaps he was mistaken. The guy replied that this could not be. Jessica thought that if we talk about the hand of an ordinary magician, then, to be honest, this is not what she expected at all, since she thought that she had finally found a clue. But the whole case again becomes a mystery, so she turned around and said that without any leads, the investigation would be closed. Annie, in turn, should stay here. Let him report anything suspicious. The girl asked what it meant. And then before leaving, perhaps she should check it personally. She told the women that they couldn't because this was one of the conditions. And while they were talking, someone from the side shouted her name. Lloyd was surprised and wondered what it was. Could it be Rector Elizabeth Willow? The girl also didn't understand if they really knew each other. Jessica asked her interlocutor what brought her here. The rector asked what it was about that she could at least greet her friend. The commander noticed that she was too friendly now. Although she had not previously allowed her to meet Professor Roger in person, she might not pretend anymore. Elizabeth smiled and told her not to hurt their helpful newcomer because she liked him so much, and how could she leave him alone with her? The interlocutor asked if she really considered her to be a person who constantly breaks others. The rector noted. But isn't that so? Then Jessica turned around and said that she had gone, so the girl didn't have to see her off. Elizabeth asked to have a drink, at least tea with her. While he was not trying to find contact with each other, the hero stood near the window and realized that this was the rector, as well as the patron. At the same time, he has no idea what kind of relationship there could be between them. But thanks to her, he was able to avoid meeting this crazy woman. Lloyd is one of those people who shouldn't let his guard down, but his actions are good clues for him. First, the guy checked if there was dust on the shelves. He himself looked clean and well-groomed, and the hero thinks that he is a germaphobe. If someone like him offers a handshake with his bare hand, it means he wanted to know something. Roger thought that just in case he asked Sheridan to make him artificial skin. In the end, it was completely not in vain. Understanding the situation, Roger thought it was a good try, but unfortunately he had prepared better. Now it was time to relax and prepare the test. Time passed quickly and a whole week flew by. Sylvia reported that the others had acted very carefully lately. It seems that the reason is the recent visit of Jessica's patron to Theon. The hero asked what she meant. The girl noticed that people were trying to avoid contact with each other. This was as much as possible. Now the private meeting is being held outside of Theon. Roger said that he understood everything. And is there anything else unusual? Sylvia said, speaking of this 2 days ago, 3 people of the Third Order were captured by the police. The man was surprised and asked about it. The accomplice replied that he heard everything correctly. It was not worth his attention, so she did not tell him about it. The hero noticed that they were so stupid that they were caught by the police. The assistant said that they say there were academy students involved. There were 2 boys and also 1 girl from his class. The main character thought that if we are talking about his class, then several students immediately come to mind. He asked if he understood correctly that it was Adrian, Leo and Tracy. Sylvia was surprised and noticed that it was them. The professor asked, but how in the world were these guys able to catch someone outside the city? The girl replied that it seemed like they were carrying out assignments at that moment. The man didn't understand what the assignment was, so the assistant said that low-class students had an assignment board through which they could pay for their tuition, and those 3 students they were talking about were not from the richest families. The hero thought that even if it were so that these guys caught the people of the Third Order, it was surprising. He, of course, continued to follow them, but this was beyond his expectations. The girl asked what she should do with the people from the Order. The professor said that if it's about them, then let her leave them, and that's it. Because he doesn't need those who can be overcome. Some students. Sylvia hesitated a little, but noticed that this was definitely the professor. So even absolutely right, the hero asked if there was anything else. The girl noticed that apart from the agreement to lie low for a short time, there was nothing more. The hero said that if this is so, then it's good. But then he got up from his workplace and said that then he should go. The subordinate immediately agreed to this, and so the professor headed into the classroom to give a lecture on his subject. He said that today the first testing stage begins, so I'm completely sure that they prepared diligently for him. As he said, he will teach the students who took the first 5 places in the list in the source code formula. Of course, he won't teach them the whole formula at once, but we'll divide it into 4 stages and teach them 1 for each test. If you discover that they are cheating, then let them know that they will have to pay the appropriate price for this. In that case, the test was starting right now, and he used magic to hand over the sheets. Soon the time was up and the main character said that the test was over. Someone was depressed and said that they understood everything when he allowed the notes to be used on the test. But it was so difficult that they were not even needed. The princess stood at the top of the audience, and immediately addressed Renee, who was leading below. But the girl did not listen to her and went downstairs, then turned to Professor Roger. The man looked at her and asked if there were any questions about the test. The student said that this is not so. She finished reading the book that he gave her recently. That's why she would like to return it. Roger will be on it. He said that she might not return it, and the girl was surprised because of this. The man continued to say that in the future she would again need this very book, and also the edition that he gave her was much more important. So she considers this to be respect for the previous owner, which is why she may not return it and keep it. And this is because he believes that only in her hands will this book be able to show its full potential. Renee was indeed very surprised when she heard such pleasant words from the man, followed by the princess who turned to her. She didn't understand what happened and asked about it, because the interlocutor ran away so quickly. The girl paid attention to her, and noticed that there was nothing wrong. Then she smiled sweetly and asked how she wrote the test. It wasn't that difficult at all. Not at all how she imagined it. After these words, Adrian's face changed and asked about the removal. It was so easy. Renee noticed that she was probably very tired and couldn't pull herself together at all. This also happens, don't worry. Her Highness noticed that this is really the case. Because as a matter of fact, she had so many things on her mind that she could not properly prepare for this event. The director studied the documents and said, no matter how many times she revised them, she never ceases to be surprised. One can only think that Professor Roger was able to compose such questions. It turns out that this requires a strong foundation and knowledge of the basics with the correct placement of tricks and complexity of the test. The woman did not expect much from this tough guy, but he in turn greatly surprised her. The old man asked how she would compare him with Professor Chris Benamor, since they are both professors of incarnation, so he is sure that the sections in the test were similar. The rector shouted that it would be cruel to compare them. Chris poses difficult questions in the exam just to show off his knowledge, and she is sure that he has already looked at this very test. She would like to see what expression he has on his face now. The guy in reality was now looking at him, and his hands were shaking quite violently with anger. And when he could not stand his own aggression, he immediately grabbed this piece of paper and threw it at the door. Chris thought that he was wondering why the rector suddenly came, but how did he even take note of the questions from Professor Roger's exam? The woman brought the documents and told Professor Chris that he was also responsible for the incarnation section, so she brought it to him after thinking a little. After all, they could be useful to him when preparing the next exam. He was angry and thought that it was only possible to think about it, to be compared with some fallen nobleman. Let Roger Selassie watch what happens, because this man will avenge the shame he caused him. And after some time, a new sunny day arrived at the An's Academy. Renee walked along the path and thought that she had already prepared for other exams, in which case she thought that now she could calmly win. Adriana immediately returned to school because she was shocked by this exam, and hoped she will feel much better. Her thoughts were interrupted by students who were on the sidelines and looking at her. The guy noticed who would just look at who they have here, isn't it a proud and noble commoner? The girl noticed that she was asking him to move away. The interlocutor blocked her path, and said that she was mumbling there because he couldn't hear anything. Renee asked if he was angry because she rejected him, for which he should be ashamed of being noble. The aristocrat became very angry when he heard this, and shouted that she was a pathetic commoner, and should know her place. Then he grabbed her hand quite strongly and shouted. From then on she followed him. The girl asked what he was doing and told her to let go. But that same guy didn't listen to her at all, and so he grabbed her quite tightly and then threw her to the side. The girl's body immediately fell to the ground, and then she began to rise. The interlocutor asked if she still dared to look into his eyes. It's just because of people like her that she's exploring teaching commoners her manners. Suddenly, on the other hand, another guy appeared and asked what he was doing here. The students who were there noticed him, and said that this was Freddie Wilberg. Renee was also amazed and thought that there were rumors that he was cruel and merciless towards commoners. But why did he come here? The aristocrat smiled and said that he was raising the little scoundrel because he was noble. The interlocutor noticed that if he educates, it means he is mocking her. The boy said that this is not true, because this commoner dared to look down on the noble. Freddie interrupted him and shouted at him to cover his mouth. At the same moment he used magic and pinned the guy's body to the ground. With a cold tone, he said that this man is trash who has sullied the name of a noble man. It is unclear how much longer he will endure trash who has nothing better to do. After that, he asked if he was angry that the guy was now taking him into account. The interlocutor replied that, of course, not. Freddie said that in this case he was leaving and would not repeat it twice for sure, and the man agreed with this. When the others left, the girl turned to the aristocrat and thanked him for helping her. The interlocutor immediately drew attention to her and literally wanted to say something. The girl was expecting these words, but he noticed that he didn't want to say anything. Then he asked if he understood correctly that it was her lunch, and she would not be able to eat it anymore. Renee noted that everything was in order, because she would clean it of dirt. Freddie asked if she was going to do this with what touched the ground, and if it was okay, he could share his lunch. The interlocutor was surprised. They soon headed to another place, and she asked what it was, because she had never noticed it. The guy replied that this was his personal space. Even his bodyguards don't know about him. If he keeps him a secret from other students, he can come here whenever he wants. Renee said that of course she won't tell anyone. Then she drew attention to the food that the boy took out, and asked if it was really his lunch. The aristocrat noted that everything was correct because he got carried away a little and did too much. Renee was surprised that he prepared it himself. In this case, she asked to let her try it, and it is very tasty. The guy said that he is really glad that she liked it, but asked to eat more slowly. The girl thought that she had been told before that he hated commoners. But he didn't look like that kind of person at all. That's why I continued to eat happily, and decided that I couldn't believe various rumors. At that time the streets near the academy were quite noisy. Selena turned her attention to the side and noticed that it was Professor Roger. He came closer to her, and she asked if his exams were really over. The man said that everything was right. He was already taking them to check them. Then I asked the girl if she might have a practical exam. She replied that this is how practical exercises are more useful for calling hotels. Therefore, he asks if he wants to look at them. The man hesitated a little after that, but when he saw the professor's puppy dog eyes, he agreed and thought that she seemed nervous about her first exam. So the hero told her that he would look at him. The woman was happy. She did not notice that he was following her then. Class has started and she said that during the exam they will communicate with spirits. So let them use magical power to communicate and make friends with them. First of all, she herself will demonstrate all this to them. This is where the professor concentrated her energy, and it was clear that different elements appeared near her. She touched the glowing ball that was nearby and greeted him. The students were dumbfounded by this, and said that this was the power of the spiritual professor. Selena asked if everyone saw this. All this is not difficult if they follow what she just showed and let them begin. The students immediately dispersed to a convenient distance, otherwise they would abandon their classes. The woman turned to Roger and asked if he wanted to try it. How easy it was. The man replied that he didn't want to, but was grateful for it, because he was not the type of person who liked perfumes. The interlocutor smiled and replied that this simply cannot be because the spirits are very kind. Let him look at the one she is holding in her arms. She suddenly noticed that he is friends. At the same time, she examined the others and they also behaved quite strangely. Selena realized that even the other spirits did not approach Professor Roger. The hero realized that she was surprised and asked if he hadn't told her before. All this is because the spirits don't like him. Before that someone called him a son and said that he has the quality of a shaman, so the divine spirits protect him. Selena asked what was going on because there are times when he is not interested, but to think that they are scared. Machiavelli said that one can say that he is an exception, but still those who fear him are only spirits of the lowest rank. The teacher looked to the side and said that it was true that mid-rank spirits were calm, however. It was unfortunate that it would be nice for him to get close to the spirits. The hero replied that there are different people in the world. In any case, she is now conducting an exam. So is she sure that she can leave this to her assistants? The woman became wary and said that she really had a bad head, so she ran. Machiavelli, after she left, immediately exhaled with ease, thought, thank God his magical power is still enough. It would be bad if the middle-rank spirits also reacted. In this case, Professor Selena suspected him. Those spirits are not afraid of him. But it is behind. Only the lower ranks can feel the strange power, and this is ironic. His thoughts were interrupted by the gaze that the man felt on himself from the other side. It turns out that they are hiding between the trees. This energy is the spirit of the day, and of a high rank. So is it really possible that in this case, others did not feel it? Even Professor Selena, who is sensitive to spirits, does not react. A presence that can't be felt by a spiritual professor who controls mid-level spirits looks strange, and then this guy is strong. Roger can even say that this is not a spirit that exists in nature. It is a spirit that is controlled by someone, and if they are so clearly watching him, then there can only be one answer. Another First Order is hiding in Thien. Although it was unclear to the man why they suddenly decided to appear right now, and it turns out that they were simply watching him, doing nothing. Immediately, thoughts came to mind that they found out that Roger was fake. But no. Then they would not have watched him, but acted immediately. There is a possibility that those same people were sending him a signal, so he unbuttoned his shirt and said that it was somehow hot. After this, the temperature rose, and the hero realized that they were reacting to his words. Then he has no other choice but to go to them in order to meet. The main character came to a place where there was no one. And what will they do now, even if he does not react? Then at least the man will know who he is dealing with. Just because of this, he under no circumstances wants to miss this opportunity. After a short period of time, he came to a place where there was fiery energy. Machiavelli turned his attention downwards and wondered if this was a letter. The sign that was left stated that there was to be a meeting at this location this evening after classes. And after some time in the designated place, the main character was located. He saw a fiery spirit in front of him who said that he had arrived even a little earlier than they agreed. Roger paid attention to him and thought that there was no physical body, and he had a premonition that this would happen. Then he invited the interlocutor to get straight to the point, and what it was he wanted from him. The stranger asked if he really should get straight to the point because he, as always, is cold. But in any case, he needs his help. Machiavelli asked about this in surprise, and the spirit said that he was going to create chaos in the academy, and he himself knows that his role is destruction. But those same magicians put out the fires that he causes. The hero asked if he really wanted him to help him in playing with fire, thought it was chaos, and it looked like they were planning a terrorist attack. The interlocutor said that if we talk about these games, he doesn't want to do anything like that. But after his subordinates, the second order disappeared. Unlike other members of the first order, he does not work with anyone. With Roger's skills, revealing his identity and helping him should not be a problem. Of course, she does not ask for free work and will definitely compensate if he helps. It will be something like a mutual contract between them. The man inquired about the contract between whom. The girl noticed that of course between John Doe and Esmeralda. After Roger heard this name, he realized that it was not real, and it must be a code name like his. Then the interlocutor asked whether he agreed to her proposal or not. A few moments passed, and he said that he was refusing it. All because he can't do anything in the current situation. Esmeralda asked what he was saying. Let him wait, because she told everything. So is he sure? And even if he doesn't tell her now that he's just too lazy to do it, the man said that in his eternal situation he would agree. But now everything is different. The director still suspects him, and he cannot make informed decisions about her. The interlocutor naturally did not like all this. Then Roger turned around suddenly facing her, and said that if that was all she wanted to say, then he went, thought that he had received enough information. It was time to leave. When he walked a short distance away, Esmeralda asked him to wait. She said that she thought for a few moments, and decided that she had recently learned interesting information. Namely, she says that she recently heard that he has his own subordinate. But how is it that someone like the great John Doe who can do anything has a subordinate? In addition to all this, he is a person from the second order. So does it happen to him that something is wrong here? The girl asked not to tell her that he was planning something secret from those very people. The hero felt a flame near his face, and said that she spoke as if she knew him well. This is especially strange for someone who came to him only for help. She not only rushes to her domain, she even suspects him. And all this happens only because he infiltrated the Academy, and did nothing outstanding. So does he really dare to look down on him? Esmeralda asked what the hell was going on. He was acting strange. Roger said that he couldn't be the only one who didn't have an assistant when everyone else had professors. So he decided that he needed to choose someone from the organization, in which case he thinks there is no point in explaining this to her further. After these words, the man continued to move forward and the spirit followed him. Further, it was the girl herself who said that she was just joking, and wondered if it seemed to him that he took this joke too seriously. The main character turned around and said that he didn't care whether she suspected him or not. This time he wouldn't find fault with it. But at the same time, he should not even dare to doubt his loyalty to the Zero Order. And if this happens again, one of them will have to pay for it. Esmeralda hesitated a little and apologized after these words, adding that since she had nothing more to say, she was leaving. And now the very spirit of fire that had been in the air all this time began to gradually dissolve. After some time, when the interlocutor disappeared, the hero grabbed his head and thought that this could end badly. Thank God that he studied what this very John Doe was, and if he had not done all this, he would have died on the spot. The man stopped near the tree and decided that after thinking, the voice behind the flame was a young woman. If this is an elementalist who can control high-ranking spirits and flames, the elementalists are the first to become suspicious of the professor. Also, we must not forget about the students who can control the spirits of the flame. He remembered that Laser Welk was organizing an event to welcome new professors. Since all the sponsors will be there, Thea and all the professors should also be present. If she is a professor, she will be present at this event, and this is his chance. Between his thoughts, the main character headed to the academy and returned to his home. The girl looked at him from the window and thought that he was so focused on his work that she thought nothing had happened, but it seemed like she was worrying in vain. In the end, it turns out that he did not feel fear of her flame, and perhaps it was much stronger than she expected. If that was the case, then all the effort she had made was in vain. You can also say that she remembered here that an event will be held there soon, and this is bad. Although there is nothing wrong with that because the main role will not be hers, but someone else's. Renee walked in the garden and thought that she didn't expect to be able to have lunch with him again. It seems that her new acquaintance has no bad intentions. Even from childhood, she could determine who had evil intent or bad intentions towards her. The only people around her who do not have malicious intent against her are Adriana. But Freddy also recently appeared and helped her in a difficult situation. They are really good people like Professor Roger, who also speaks well of her. Although, if you think about it, he doesn't feel any good intentions towards her, rather sadness or guilt, but it's not clear why. The girl's thoughts were interrupted by her interlocutor, who greeted her and asked if she understood correctly that she was Renee, a first-year student. Then he introduced himself and said that he was Freddie's friend, Henry Presto, and he was pleased to meet you. It turns out that she had just been with his friend. The girl hesitated and asked how he found out about this. The interlocutor noted that he had his own methods, and he was also interested in what the guy had been doing lately. The student looked at him and thought that he had no evil intentions towards her, but she felt that he was dangerous. Henry noticed the incredulous look at himself, and asked if he had done something wrong, yet she didn't need to be so afraid of him. After a few moments he raised his hand and said that as a way to settle their relationship, let him help her. After all, he has a part-time job that pays well and is quite safe. I'm sure she herself knows that academy students are mostly commoners, and they, in turn, have no money. The girl asked why he was telling her this, because they had just met. He noticed that it was out of curiosity, because he was shocked to see his friend. It was strange that he was spending time with a commoner like her. Renee asked if it was really that surprising. She just thought he was a good person. The interlocutor thought for a few seconds and then began to laugh very hard and asked what kind of good person Freddie was. The student asked why he was laughing, but Henry said that he thought the same even after all the time spent next to him. Either way, he was just curious to see the two of them together. She could decide if she wanted to accept the proposal after she knew all the details. Therefore, with a smile on his face, he asked what she thought about this. After some time, the hour came for the very event that the main character was talking about. A large number of people had already gathered in the hall, and the atmosphere was quite noisy. People said that it seemed like all the main characters of the party were already here. The guy remarked that he heard the new professors have good skills, and after some time, Machiavelli also came with him. The man noticed that there must be various rumors circulating about him, and most likely it was the same Roger Chilichi who arrived at this event. The girl said that this is Count Chris Benamor. He is irresistible, as all the rumors say. The guy was pleased and only thanked him for these kind words. The hero carefully assessed the atmosphere and thought that everyone was looking for connections. First, he decided to study the situation and then go in search of Esmeralda. Suddenly, an old man approached him and asked if he was really Professor Roger, and he was Count Deckers. But the hero interrupted him and apologized. Then he looked rather coldly and said that he was not in the mood to talk right now. The interlocutor understood everything when he saw him and said that he understood everything and then he would not take up his time. Roger thought since he pounced on the Count, no flies would bother him. In which case he would use this to find Esmeralda. Selina apologized and said that they did not know this person so well, so she asked not to say anything. The hero paid attention because this voice was familiar. There the man stood in front of the girl and asked why she was trying to avoid him. The teacher was confused and did not know what to answer. Then the main character entered their conversation and told him to stop, because Professor Selina already has plans for him. This man immediately asked who he was, and the one who was next to him explained everything. The first asked that if he was a new professor, then what of it? This is scoundrel, because in any case he must know who he is. Then he turned to the man and said that he is the director of the Luke Company, and his name is Evan Luke. I'm sure he heard his company, and if he understood then let him get out of the way. Roger noticed the trembling hands of the girl standing behind him. Then he approached the interlocutor and asked if he hadn't told him that he already had plans with her. The interlocutor pointed his finger at him and asked if he had decided to joke with him. Did he really think that he would fall behind just because he was a professor at the academy? Who did he even take him for? The hero immediately grabbed him tightly by the hand. The man said that since he spoke to him in such a tone, he would speak to him in the same way. Did he really think that he would fall behind because he would still talk about being the director of the company? That big shot was screaming at him to let him go. Did he really want to be fired from his job? And at the same time wondered why such a huge force had disappeared. Roger continued to hold him back and said let him try it. Another guy got in the way from the side and told them to stop because people might get hurt. Evan shouted that he was a damn fallen noble, so the subordinate told the young master that he should calm down, because he was being watched. A few moments later, a blow to the cheek was clearly heard, and the aristocrat said that he told him to call him director. He hit the guy he was talking to, and he asked the director for forgiveness. Then the gentleman asked if he wanted him to calm down after such treatment. This Roger, or whatever his name is, he would get him fired. The hero looked at this and thought that everyone was eating even more than he expected. He wanted to run away, using Professor Selina as an excuse. Suddenly Elizabeth came and asked what happened, because she was interested. Evan shouted that she was on time. He asked how she trains the professors at the academy. This fallen noble tried to use violence against him. If they still want Luke Company to sponsor them in the future, they need to fire him immediately. The girl noticed that she was wondering who he was, and he is the son of the chairman. I asked if the owner of the company, Luke Chairman Theodore, understood this correctly. But why does some director throw around empty words? Didn't he discuss everything with his father, the guy said? Of course, his father would agree with this because he is his son. The woman asked if this was really so. Then she turned to the chairman who was standing behind, very angry, and asked if he thought the same. The guy noticed his father and was discouraged. Soon, Theodore apologized for his son's behavior in front of Elizabeth's reactor. The interlocutor replied that everything was fine, because she was even slightly refreshed. The old man drew attention to the main character, and thanked him for not putting it that way. The director said, since leaving everything as is a little ugly, how about this? The interlocutor asked what she was suggesting in general. The girl looked at the main character, and he humiliated him, and said that in front of everyone, the two of them could have a fair duel. Roger was stunned when he heard this, and thought that she was saying such a thing because she had handled the situation so well, but suddenly this. Although no, maybe that's a good thing. If the situation had ended, the guy wouldn't have accepted it. Chairman Theodore doesn't look happy about it either. The hero thought that a duel here would guarantee that there would be no trouble later, so he touched his weapon and said that he did not mind. Next, he said to Evan, since he doesn't have magic, it's allowed for someone to fight instead of him. How about this? The guy said that sounded good, and he wanted that too. Therefore, he told his assistant that he would give him the opportunity to correct his mistake, and thought that if his assistant was fighting for him, then it was worth a try. After all, he has a fairly experienced magician, but after a few moments his facial expressions changed, and he said that it couldn't be. And not even a minute of the battle had passed before the opponent was already defeated, and Roger Teleki was declared the winner. From the outside, people said that the company's bodyguard Luke is also a difficult person. It seems that the rumors that he uses unique magic formulas are true. Theodore said that this is quite surprising, and are all professors in Theon really monsters of this level, the rector said. Of course not. Roger is just a rather unique person. In any case, whether the chairman understands correctly that he is not complaining about this, he noticed, as he thought, his face showed it, and he seems to be aging. Since it was a fair fight, he must accept. He shouldn't worry about his stupid son because he will have a good talk with him. The woman said that it was her expectation from the chairman that she was pleased that they were on the same wavelength. The old man said, no matter how it was, he wanted to ask her something. Elizabeth refused. Theodore noticed that he had not said anything yet. The interlocutor stated that he was going to ask her to introduce him to Professor Roger. He asked for forgiveness, but let him refrain from contacting one of their professors. The old man agreed. But the heroes have already gone out into the street. He thought it was finally over, and now he could focus on his goal. But suddenly he heard Selina, who ran out after him and turned to him. Machiavelli drew attention to her and asked if she was okay. The girl replied that yes, she received an apology personally from the chairman of the company Luke, and thanks for helping her. Then she asked where he was going now. The man replied that he didn't even know, because he had no plans. The interlocutor noticed that she was going to a meeting with professors of animism, and would he like to go with her? This attracted the attention of the hero because he was looking for just the person, so he decided that this was a great opportunity, and agreed to it, and soon they were there. The girl greeted the professor who invited her, and the interlocutor noticed that this was Professor Selina. But who was next to her? The elf said that this is Professor Roger. He heard that he was appointed to the second year as a new professor. The hero thought that no one really reacted to him. The man noted that this would not be discussed like that, because someone like him does not deserve to teach a second year. The interlocutor said that he was quite modest. Then the conversations continued with the hero. In the end I realized that all this was useless, because it turns out that he was carefully observing the three professors, but none of them showed any special reaction. In their recent conversation, Esmeralda had been difficult and short-tempered, so she wasn't the type to maintain her composure in a situation like this. This means that perhaps she is not one of the professors, although no, since he lacks information, he must consider all options. He needed to moisten his throat, so he went to drink, and suddenly a girl turned to him, and called his name. He looked at his interlocutor, and asked if it was Renee. Then he asked what she was doing here. The girl immediately hesitated. She further stated that she had recently been recommended to work here part-time. If he looked closely, several of her classmates were also here. Roger said that he understood everything and noticed that she should not be overtired and let her go home before it was too late. The girl thanked her, and said that she then went. Selina came up and said to the professor, "Here he is." "But isn't this his baby Renee?" The man asked if she really knew her too. The woman noted that everything was correct. She knew her before. Another assistant works here in the summer. I wonder if the hero asked whether she was talking about her assistant or not, but the interlocutor turned her attention to the side and said that she was talking about that little girl. She was a new student. She was already well versed in animism. And now we are talking about Joanna Levite. The hero turned his attention there and saw this girl. Therefore, I thought that if I think about it so carefully, then he completely forgot the students since she was a high-level animist. Only because of this did he think that she would definitely turn out to be a professor at this academy. When that same girl saw him, she turned around and walked away and he didn't understand where it was going. Joanna walked over to the table and sat down the object she was holding in her hands, and then she stopped next to him. Roger looked there and wondered if she had really left just to put the tray down. Still, it looks like he's paying attention to things on a raccoon, and at this rate, he's sure to miss important details. Suddenly, I heard a conversation from the side, and there was one saying, "How about this? Didn't these guys want to start a business? They bought fabric and seemed to be going into agency production." The interlocutor asked what people from the lower class were thinking about. Machiavelli thought that this was probably Violetta, and she acts even faster than he thought, although she is trying to hide it. It must be, she is already into spare, so you can rely on her. The girl said that this is ridiculous, and how dare they not know their place, and conduct business as commoners on the territory of the imperial family. The interlocutor asked not to be angry because isn't it obvious that they will soon go bankrupt? You should just watch them over a glass of wine. The hero thought that they were just idiots. This is all due to the fact that their inaction will eventually turn into a huge wave, one that will change throughout the future. Soon those people who are laughing now will understand everything, and they and their friends too. And then the man's thoughts were interrupted by a sharp headache that covered him in an instant. Roger immediately lost concentration and fell out of his hands into the glass that contained the drink. Selena saw what happened and asked if everything was okay with him. The interlocutor noted that everything was fine here. It was just a slippery floor. Then he added that he would be back soon because he needed to get some fresh air. Professor Chris was also nearby and saw this situation, so he looked in surprise. Machiavelli went out into the street, and there were voices in his head about the power that they asked him to accept. He, in turn, asked them to shut up. And in order to get rid of this, he immediately took several pills that he took out of his pocket. After a short period of time, the voices in my head will subside. The man thought concentrating on a quick duel, he used up too much magical power. He was too careless, and did not even notice all this. After the pain disappeared, he began to walk back. Chris Benamor peeked out from around the corner, and was watching him. He immediately wondered if it was the smell of medicine. The main character began to return and suddenly heard requests for help, but he did not understand what it was. There was a lot of fire around, as well as people running away, shouting that it was a monster, and exploring to escape. Roger looked ahead and saw a rather large fiery spirit, but he did not understand what the hell it was. The first thing that came to mind was that this creature was summoned by Esmeralda. The monster noticed new victims who were standing right in front of him, and immediately released a stream of flame from his mouth. Naturally, people noticed this attack and jumped away from the point of impact. And next they used their magic to block the fire that came from there. At the same time, the men did not understand where this monster came from. Someone noticed that they should stop thinking and prioritize evacuating people. One of the professors stood near the exit and directed all the people to leave. A spiritual monster appeared at the top of this huge building. People were asking in a panic what else it was. One of them was created by Angela Anderson, Theon's fifth-year animism professor, and the second by Justin Dantis, a fourth-year animism professor. And so the spiritual practitioners, as well as other people, began an attack on the huge spirit of fire. In the end they said that everything was bad, because not a single attack worked. You had to be careful about all this, because something was dripping from the ceiling. The guy used his weapon and prepared to fight off the flames as he had done before. But this attack did not work, and the streams of the day headed towards him, and also hit him. Those who were behind and saw this shouted that they should not touch the falling flames. But if the black flame touched their clothes, they should take them off immediately. The main character was also going to fight and thought that it was different from ordinary fire. It was something closer to his mother and destructive power too. If this is the case, then in this case it is not just a high-level spirit, but a spirit of the highest level that has already reached the 6th rank. Although I decided that I needed to stop and think about why it was a spirit in a humanoid form, because they usually take natural forms, for example, animals or plants. Something is definitely wrong. If you think about it, there is something strange about this monster. If you take a good look at his body, then there is no normal lower half there, which means he was incarnated with the help of a medium. The biggest advantage of using a medium to summon is that the identity of the hotel's summon can be hidden. We can say that in reality the silver tray that stands in the center of the table is very suspicious. So based on this, we can say that everything is as the man thought Joanna Loviot is Esmeralda. It is natural that now it is impossible to follow her. Since the hero has found a way to break through, then take care. When Roger was about to go and fight that same fiery spirit, he noticed that there was something there. Under the rubble of the building that the monster brought down, his student lay. At that moment she was still conscious and asked what happened. It was not clear what kind of huge monster appeared in front of her. If so, then she needed to run away quickly. But her legs do not move at all, because pinned by the rubble, the creature at that moment released a huge stream of fire. And this attack was directed directly towards the girl who lay under the rubble and could not move. Renee looked ahead and realized that this was a hopeless situation, so she immediately closed her eyes. But a few moments later I heard a voice, and when I opened them, I saw that Professor Roger was in his arms. He asked if everything was okay with her, and the girl was very surprised at that moment. So she looked around and asked what it was. When they got here, the man said that she had wounded her leg early. It wasn't very deep, so he would apply some medicine. The girl wondered what it was because for some reason she had a certain feeling of déjà vu about this situation. So, I immediately contacted the professor. He asked what happened. Renee asked if they had met somewhere before. Roger drew attention to her and said, "Why is she talking?" Because it seemed she was mistaken. The girl noticed that this was not so, because there was just something it seemed. The man stood up and said that he had finished treating her wound, but it was dangerous here, so let him leave quickly. The student asked what about him. The teacher said that he must do his duty and now let them leave. After these words, she agreed and thanked her for saving her. Machiavelli first looked at how the girl left the room and then turned his attention to the monster. The next action was to use the dark magic of Eternocturnus. As a result, dark energy completely covered his body, and he soon found himself near the head of the creature. Then he began to examine it carefully to understand where to strike. After a short period of time, he announced that his games would end here. Animism Professor Angela channeled her fighting spirit forward. He immediately rushed to attack the fire monster in order to try to hit it. The elf also had no intention of staying still and immediately sent his water spirit to. The result of their actions was a combined attack directly on the upper torso. After this attack, the fire monster's limb immediately fell off and fell to the ground. Those who attacked him said that they succeeded, and he lost one of his arms, so there was a chance of victory. Justin thought that this was not so. He did not cause only damage, and as much as he expected. Besides, one attack was enough for the spirit to begin to disintegrate. The same limb that was destroyed moments later and began to regenerate. The elf saw this and wondered if she had really recovered, and at the same time shouted to Professor Angela to quickly recall her spirit. The monster at the same moment rushed at the creatures that attacked it, not long ago. The guy looked at it, and thought that they couldn't handle this thing with their current level of power. As luck would have it, the rector had already left. And perhaps he was the target of the spirit. After that, he looked carefully up again and saw some kind of shadow, but did not understand what it was. Soon the main character appeared in the air. The elf was surprised and wondered if it was Roger Salici. After the man appeared at the top, he immediately used his spell and attacked the spirit. The opponent saw this and covering himself with his own limbs tried to protect himself. Justin didn't understand what else this was because the spirit was moving somehow strangely as if he were trying to protect something right now. Then I carefully examined what was in the center, and saw that there was some kind of object there. Therefore he shouted to the others that he understood everything. This thing was caused by a medium. Machiavelli thought that he did not have enough strength at all because he could not use high-level magic due to exhaustion. Then I decided that in this case I needed to get closer, and immediately did so. Then he pointed the cane he was holding at the creature, and prepared to shoot. Some kind of force began to appear near the tray, and the hero said that it was all over. It was ice, which completely covered him and a few moments later exploded. The fiery creature immediately began to scream very loudly, and then disappeared. Justin was dismayed by this, and said that this man still did it. Suddenly, all the production workers heard a voice speaking to a man. It was the same fiery spirit that said that he was a damned scoundrel. In the end, let them all be extremely sure that one day they will burn to the ground. Roger said that in this case he would try to do it if he could. The spirit continued to stand his ground and said that he would definitely see to it that they all burned. But just a few moments after he said all this, he disappeared from the authorities. The hero who had been hovering in the air all this time also descended after a few moments. Soon the elf asked him if it was true that his lower half was not normally formed. Roger noticed that everything was correct, and after a careful examination of the blurred parts, it turned out that that creature was connected to a medium. The interlocutor said that he was able to discover even this. The man replied that anyone in his place would understand this too. Justin said that this is not true because he did not notice it at all. In fact, since he is well versed in animism, he did not even think in this way. Contracts and animism are made to be fair to both parties, which is why force summoning, which spirits hate, is almost never used. And he in turn had never heard of a spirit that people hate. Roger asked if spirits usually don't look like that creature. The interlocutor noted that everything is true. Therefore spirits are representatives of nature. For the most part, they don't care about people. To think that such a spirit could exist, and it was impossible to react quickly, however, thanks to Professor Roger, the damage was minimized. Especially the magic that he used at the end. Was it really movement in space? The hero was very surprised when he realized what he said. Justine saw this and said that he shouldn't react so sharply to it. After all, he had lived for quite a long time and had seen a lot of things. Machiavelli said that it was true that he placed a little magical power in a certain coordinate, and then manifested it. The interlocutor asked if this was really possible. The man noted that at first it is difficult, but when you get used to it, it becomes quite easy. The elf thought that even when people get used to it, and cannot easily control it, unless they have innate abilities for spatial perception, or there is something else, so he asked how the man was feeling. He asked what he meant. The teacher said that when he used May, not being in the best condition, did he experience any strange symptoms? For example, he could hear quite strange sounds. The hero was still dumbfounded, since he understood that he accurately described his situation. Justin said that perhaps he was worrying for nothing, but he should know that sometimes there are people with more developed thinking than others. The world classifies them as a genius, but to do so is a little wrong. Geniuses are people who, in order to reveal their talent, break part of the barrier of human capabilities. Then those about whom he speaks do not exist at all. The man asked if this is not good. The interlocutor noted that at first it may seem like a blessing, but it is not so. All this is because people do not realize that their overwhelming barrier is actually a strong wall protecting from the outside. That's why he asked Professor Roger if he's ever heard strange noises in his head. The man said that the concept he was talking about was incredibly interesting, but unfortunately, it had nothing to do with him. Justin asked again if this was true. The hero replied that everything was true, but it was still very interesting. Is there anything else that could be added to it? The interlocutor noted that, unfortunately, this is all that he was told in his youth. The hero noted that we are talking about the youth of the elf. Then for people it is rather just a legend. The elf smiled and said that perhaps this was so, and at the same time he thought that he was such an extraordinary person, and he already thought about it, it seemed to him. As a result, he thinks that an ordinary person could not cope with this in a sober mind. Roger asked if there was anything else besides this. Justin looked at him in surprise, and the man said that he said before, they hear voices from outside. But I wonder if there is anything else besides this. The interlocutor said as far as he knows these are only voices. Ordinary people would not be able to perceive them, Machiavelli said, and if they imagine that they are capable of this, the teacher noted that in this case the next stage can begin. For example, if the symptoms are now worsening, he assumes that then he will start to see certain things. Also, he should not forget that this is just a big if, because in the end, if something followed after this, then most likely it is only one thing. And now the elf says that he could come into contact with them personally, that is, anyone. After some time, the hero sat at the table and looked at the newspaper. It was written there that there was a terrorist who attacked the banquet hall, and this was the identity of the criminal. The damage was considerable, and most of the victims were the cream of society. The man thought that if this was Esmeralda's goal, then she had certainly half succeeded. Even so, it was good for them too. Since they had figured out her identity, Roger wondered if he should pass this information on to Theon. Although this definitely shouldn't be done because the girl has only just begun to act, if her identity is revealed immediately, Black Dawn will suspect him, because he then destroyed the spirit. So it's not the right time yet, we need to watch and wait for the right moment to attack. On the headlines of the newspapers, he noticed only the guy himself. It was Evan Luke, and could he really be the head of the Const auction house? Increased auction security due to yesterday's incident, and it's quite annoying. Suddenly, the girl broke off the relationship. She wondered how he could invite a lady at such an early hour. The hero looked at her, and said that she had come after all. It was Violet who said that we should go, and he said that he was interested in how the slums had changed. And so they went for a walk along the roads, and the woman told him to look around because this street had recently been reconstructed. Roger looked at her, and said that it was much cleaner than before. The interlocutor noted that they used 80% of the budget to widen the road. As he said, soon this street will be filled with artisans. Other groups also follow his suggestions. Luke is working on a musical that will replace the circus, but their elders are preparing the magazine he mentioned. They plan to collect fairy tales and stories from unknown writers, although they told the children to spread rumors, but she is not sure if it will work. Roger noted that it is okay if they don't succeed. Let her just tell them that you did everything possible to advertise, by the way. Any business always requires an initial investment. The woman noticed that there were not many people willing to invest in them, but these newly opened ateliers are planning to start with more affordable clothes. But then gradually invest in luxury brands. The man noticed that she was all beaming with joy, to which she received the answer that this was, of course, so, because she dreamed about it. The hero said that it looks like they've looked at everything and they should go introduce her to people. The interlocutor asked, which people? What he means is not clear. The man responded to this by saying that we are talking about the people with whom they will work. The guy found a beauty and asked if she was free tonight. How about sharing it with him? The hero saw this man and said that here he is. Roger walked up to him, and grabbing his hand apologized to my lady, because he would have to steal it from her. Since he had an appointment with him, the girl was embarrassed, but said that she agreed. The guy said that they were supposed to meet later, and Machiavelli said that he thought he would be late if he left him alone. It was Alex, a member of the unknown group, who asked what the leader was talking about. The law accepted him, and also who was the beautiful lady next to him. The woman was not at all happy with this man and asked with disappointment if he was serious about working with them. The hero replied that everything was true. Maybe you couldn't tell from him, but his skills speak for themselves. The girl thought that maybe there was something more in him that she didn't notice. Alex said they should get down to business and asked the leader what treasures and what girls they're looking for. Violetta asked if he is sure that they can trust him. The guy apologized and said that he didn't introduce himself right away, but then he did it. He is a nobleman from the southern kingdom of Fatima, and will be glad to do business with her. The woman was surprised and asked if he was a nobleman. Roger approached her and said that he should be careful, because in fact he was a fraudster. The leader of the Black Rose Garden wondered if he had just tried to fool her. Alex asked why they called him after all. The hero replied that he would explain the details upon returning to the shelter. The interlocutor noted that if we are talking about a shelter, then is this really the place where these people come? That's just what will happen if he is disappointed. Machiavelli looked at him for a few seconds, and then told him not to worry about it. After just a short period of time, they headed to the appointed place. Hans came out in a very depressed state, and asked Roger if he had really returned. The man asked how the investigation went, because he looked tired. The guy replied that everything was fine. He just couldn't do it anymore. A voice was heard behind him. Where did he go? That's where he is. Also, the boss came, whom they had not seen for a long time. It was Beatrice Fatana. She told the guy why they stopped there, and after a while he screamed. Violetta asked if she was an elf. The man replied, how can she really see this? She is responsible for the production of medicines and gunpowder. He was asked how this could even be. Don't elves hate things made by humans? Roger pointed out that this is just a stereotype. The situation is completely different when other races subconsciously understand who is a fraud. Alex remarked to the leader that he was wondering what he thought of him. Several people asked if everyone was already here. Machiavelli said that they both arrived on time. One of his interlocutors was named Richard, but the other was Dave, the hero said. Now that they are all here, he should go inside and talk. Everyone gathered, and the man said that since Alex had finished introducing himself, now it was his turn. The man noticed that his name was Richard, and they would know each other. The guy asked if that was all he was going to tell them. Dave noticed that this man was still quiet, and hoped he would understand him. Then he introduced himself, and said that he did not have a last name. Hans noticed that he seemed special to me, and how did they meet the leader of the interesting thing? The boy asked if we are talking about Mr. Roger, that is, if you want to decorate yourself, then everything is simple. Because he is his father, the Auletta asked what he was saying. The hero replied that, in short, he is not his real son. This is a special case. The boy said that when he was born, he knew little about the world. They asked him what he meant, and he replied that he called Roger father because he taught him a lot. The hero said that he could introduce Richard himself, but before that he could take off his hat. The man did this, and it was clear that he had ears. Those present immediately asked if he was a beast man. The man said that he was right among the beast people. He was physically developed. He worked a lot where his strength was needed, for example, things like hunting whales. Hans asked if it was really a whale hunt, and if animals weren't afraid of water. Machiavelli said that was not the point. His strength and skill could lead his people. The man said that he lost anyway. That's why he decided to work for him. Roger said, one way or another he will be their main combat agent, so in this group he should be the second most powerful. He further stated that it was Violetta's turn. She hopes to continue working with them. The woman hesitated and asked to wait, because she only came here to show him the street because, as it is, she is quite busy. The hero noticed that since she was talking about business, it means she was already ready to work. She was embarrassed, and said it wasn't that she didn't want to join. And despite this, I'm not sure if she should join, because everyone has something that they are good at, but not her. Roger told Violet if he didn't think she had the skills to join them, he certainly wouldn't have brought her here. So there is only one reason why he brought her here and introduced everyone, since he was more than qualified to join. Then he extended his hand and said that he wanted to hear her final decision. So wondering if she would work with them, the girl lowered her head and began to think about it. And after a short period of time, she extended her hand up and shaking it, said that it would work. The man replied that it was just wonderful. After that, I thought that if I sum up the situation, they have all the necessary members. Now it turns out that he chose only the best of those whom he personally know, and they in turn are better in themselves than he imagined. Therefore, he soon said that before they began, let him introduce their goal. He had a smile on his face and said that very soon they would raid the upcoming construction. Violetta was surprised and asked if they were really going to attack the auction. The leader noted that she heard everything correctly, because they have what he needs. And at the same time they receive it, you can grab a few gifts on the way out. Alex raised his hand and asked the boss to wait, because he asked to be allowed to clarify something first. As far as he remembers, no one has managed to rob the very constant auction he's talking about. And over the past 20 years, there have been hundreds of attempts at this. In addition, due to recent events, security has been very well strengthened. At the same time, there are rumors about an artifact that allows them to constantly monitor the vault. That's why, if their boss is so confident in himself, then the guy believes he has a good plan. Roger immediately smiled and said that of course it was, and then asked Hans to bring it. After a few moments, all the information was on the table, so the man asked for attention. Right in front of them was a drawing of the building, but their very target is located right at the very place where he points his finger. After some time the meeting of the new group was over. Therefore, the hero was walking along the road near the academy where he worked, and suddenly saw something strange. Professor Selena was there, and Joanna was catching with her. But the most interesting thing is who they are talking to there. The girl turned her head and noticed who Professor Roger was. The man said that they had not seen Professor Selena for a long time. She replied that it was true. So much time had passed since the incident at the banquet. The person he wasn't talking to looked at the person and apologized. Machiavelli also looked back at him, and asked if they were talking about something important. The girl said that this was not so. He was just worried about what happened at the banquet. Roger apologized for asking so late, but how she was feeling, the interlocutor noted that she was fine, and that he seemed to have dealt with everything himself. Thanks to him, all the students were safe, and she turned to the assistant, asking him if she thanked Professor Roger. The hero looked at this girl and realized that this was Esmeralda, and that in her opinion, pretending to know nothing was the best option. The woman said that she was sorry if only she could help. The interlocutor noticed, and what was she saying because she was evacuating people? The interlocutor noted that this was simply all she could do, and she also did not have the necessary skills. So nothing more. Machiavelli heard her words and immediately wondered if she was really worried about this. Then he called her name again and said that, unlike her, he did not know how to smile brightly and be kind to others. Her attitude helped calm people down during the entire evacuation, so she did the best she could with the roles she was given. The girl began to say something under her breath that he called her bright and kind. At that moment she hesitated and said that she didn't even know whether she had the right to hear these words. The man was surprised by such a reaction. Suddenly, Selena noticed that classes had already started and apologized for wasting his time. She also thanks him for listening to her worries. The next time they meet, she will treat him to something delicious. The hero did not answer anything to this, and only looked at the girls leaving towards the academy. Suddenly Sylvia appeared behind him and said that she was so pathetic. How dare she shift her worries to the owner of the First Order? The professor looked at her and said that she would do well to learn to control her emotions. She was embarrassed and said that she would keep that in mind. Then the man said, now to the point, could she find out about one person for him? The girl said yes, if she instructs him to do it, then she will do it. And in this case, even to check on all his family and friends, he said that this was not necessary. He needs her to find out about Joanna Loviot. The subordinate noted that she would start doing this right away. Its director Evan arrived at the Const auction site along with his bodyguard. He stated that he had heard that they would come, but it was unclear how long he could wait for them. The guard said, "Gentlemen, why don't he wait inside?" He asked if they arrived at the same moment. Did he really want to ruin everything? This is a great opportunity for Luke Corporation to oust Lotion and expand its business. In addition, this is his only chance to regain his father's trust. Literally a few minutes later a car arrived and the guy said they were here. People started to get out of the car and the director greeted them, said welcome and stated that he was the manager of this auction site. Then he introduced himself and stated that his name was Evan Luke, the guy who got out of the car, and said that he was pleased to meet you. He had heard about him. He is the Lord of Arur Musla. It is an honor to see that someone abandoned by his family is still warmly welcomed. The manager asked to follow him because they would take care of them. Alex noted that there was no need to be so formal. They are about the same age. Why shouldn't they be just friends then? The interlocutor was surprised and asked if he was sure in this case he should go inside. The guy asked not to rush, because he was still thinking about it, and could he ask for a favor. The manager asked what kind of favor he was talking about. Alex said that on the way here he was given one valuable item, but he did not find a suitable place to store it. The interlocutor asked what it was. The Lord noticed that their family was currently using magic liquids to produce high-quality magic stones. Evan realized that these were magic stones. The guy said that this was a prototype for business, but he couldn't carry it with him everywhere. The interlocutor smiled and said that he was missing. The client remarked that if so, then perhaps he knows a good place to store it. The aristocrat replied, "Of course there is a suitable place in the basement. That's why he invites him to go there together." The interlocutor thanked him for this. At the same time, Alex had an earphone in his ear, through which he could not listen to him. Before this, the guy said that he would never have thought that things could turn out like this. The man found an exact copy of the clothes of the southern aristocrats, and he was impressed. The Alade must have tried. Roger said that he was glad that he liked it. To hope that he remembers who he should act as, the guy said only, "Of course there is not much power about him. All this is thanks to his father's business, namely, the market for magic stones, and he is an influential and handsome young nobleman." The head said, "Pretend not to have heard the last part," then turned to Dave. He asked if he could cope with the role. He just needed to remain silent and act as a bodyguard. He replied that if that was the order, he would do it. Roger said that lately the Loop Corporation has been trying to expand its influence through magical tools and artifacts. This affects magical liquids. They became a necessary ingredient to create magical tools. Alex asked if that was why he chose this identity to disguise him. The man replied that everything was right. He was using this opportunity to establish a connection. They were almost there. And let him put this in his ear before leaving. The guy asked what it was, and he answered a mobile communication device that Sheridan made. He said that he was Vigo, and now he and Melvin were heading to their destination. Evan heard a whisper and asked what he said. The interlocutor noted that he was simply admiring the interior design. The manager smiled and said that he found out that he had a good eye. Right now this was all they had to discover. It turns out that leaving the same elevator can be opened with just one key. As Han said before, he is guarded by armored knights. Recently, Roger said that their target is the basement of the Khan's building. It will not be easy, and all the auction items are stored 30 meters underground. In addition, there is an artifact that monitors every step of people. But this does not mean at all that all this is impossible. He told Richard and Alex that they needed to inspect the interior of the vault. Soon the guy told the leader that the reconnaissance was successful. Looking at the model, he was now sure that everything would work out. Roger noticed that if so, then it was a relief. After this, Alex asked if he understood correctly that they should just continue to act according to the plan. The hero noted that this was so. But did he remember the agreement? The interlocutor asked who he takes him for. "Don't worry about it." Machiavelli said that in that case he believes him. "You should finish quickly and return." The guy replied that he understood everything and was just returning, and then he would leave. Suddenly, he heard a voice asking why the leader wanted him to stay here. The guy thought that this voice sounded familiar, and when he looked inside the room, he was dismayed when he saw a man there. After that, he turned to the leader and said that they had one problem. Roger asked what happened. Alex in a slightly confused voice said that she was here. The professor did not understand who she was talking to and asked him to explain. His subordinate noticed that we were talking about Annie Joyner, and she was his ex-girlfriend. But the hero began to remember this name and did not understand that the authorities had forgotten her, so he ordered his interlocutor to run away as soon as he had the opportunity, because it won't end well if he catches her eye, especially for him. Alex said that he knows. That's why he goes when the chance arises. He looked carefully at the girl he knew and thought that she was the same as always. Then he approached the manager and called him a friend, said that it was time to leave. The interlocutor asked if he was really leaving already. He would like to talk about the matter they were discussing. The guy said that he would prefer that they talk about it in a more private setting and talk to him soon. Soon the guy returned to the shelter and asked if Beatrice had returned yet. Roger said that not yet. She was analyzing what he gave her. Then I asked this guy to explain everything in detail. Alex said that the structure of the auction house was approximately the same as on the map he showed them. But what is more important is the storage location of auction items. They are divided into 3 rooms, based on importance. The most valuable items are placed in the rooms with the largest quantity. The duration of the auction is 3 days. Every day, items from one of the rooms are put up for auction, starting from the first. Hans said that they found out that he needed the item in the third room, Sheridan said, which means they should aim for the third day of the auction. Roger noticed that this is not how their plan will be implemented on the second day. The interlocutor asked her why this was so. The man said that on the third day, security would be strengthened. Alex added that on the first day of the auction, too many outsiders would come out. So the second would be the right time. The leader asked Sheridan what about his request. The little girl replied that everything was almost ready, and in 3 days she would definitely finish. Next, the professor turned to Violetta, and asked if she could look for a specialist in construction or interior decoration. She said that she would ask Old Kiss to help with this. She further noted that as far as he knows, a knight from the intelligence service will be present. The Order of the Knights of the Intelligence Service is quite famous. And will everything really go smoothly? Alex replied that this was just a low-ranking knight, and there was nothing to worry about. And the girl asked why he thought that there would be only one recipe. When the group's plan comes, their action may become much larger. The guy said, speaking about this, it seems to him that he knows the ego. Sleep asked, what if we meet during the operation? The interlocutor noted that they met each other a long time ago and should not worry, because he perfectly fulfills his assigned role. Roger said that there would be no problems. The information he did not receive was enough today. Violetta said that it was good since he thinks so. The man continued to say that this is just a hypothesis, so the plan remains the same. The locomotive arrived at the laser walk platform and there was a lively atmosphere. The girl just got out of it, and shouted with inspiration that she was finally in the city. Then she turned to her assistant, and said that it would rain soon. Stop fooling around and let him go to her. He said that he had too much luggage and asked him not to rush. Her name is Betty, and she is this detective's assistant, and then asked why she even took so many useless things with her. The interlocutor asked how useless it was. Did she really mean things that give her endless inspiration? Suddenly several papers were blown into the wind. The assistant was horrified and said, "What the hell is this? Who the hell carries around documents about incidents like the last 5 years?" Rachel said that everything they had was very necessary. Besides, shouldn't he move faster? The girl asked why this was so. The detective answered somehow why after all she said that it would rain soon. Betty said that this was a problem and asked when he would go. The girl noted, given the humidity, precipitation, and some other factors, she could say for sure. After that, she extended her palm and began counting down from 5. The interlocutor noted that if it was 5 minutes, then she should hurry up. But she in turn continued to count down the seconds and now stopped at 1. After that, the assistant immediately shouted to Rachel that it was raining. She reached for her lock and said that she knew. She also added that they need to quickly take cover because all the pages will get wet. The assistant began to collect them and said, "Wait a second because they can't get wet." The girl in turn should know how meticulous she is in this regard. Suddenly I saw the rain stop and immediately looked up, and there was already a waterproof dome above them. The detective asked if she was surprised and the interlocutor asked if she was serious if it was in her plans, why she didn't do it from the very beginning. Green Salon Water title holder, Private Investigator Rachel Salmo just smiled. Soon they were heading to the shelter, and the assistant asked why they came to Leatherwalk. The detective noted that she had heard strange things happening in this city lately. The activity of suspicious organizations has increased, as well as the ambush of werewolves, the interlocutor asked. She asked about the one-time appearance of werewolves and unusual phenomenon. Rachel said that these were very unusual werewolves. The girl asked what this meant, how unusual they were. The detective continued her speech that, in addition, his traces were left here. Betty noticed that she again did not finish telling, and whose trace she was talking about now was interesting. The girl said that she was now talking about James Moriarty. The interlocutor was surprised and said, "Didn't he die when he fought with her?" Rachel sighed sadly and asked if she still believed in this stupid rumor. The assistant noticed that there was a rumor that they fought at the waterfall. There was a cliff there, so they fell together in the finale. The detective noticed that this was already true. And then the interlocutor wondered if she was the only one laughing at her now. The girl said that the difference between these rumors is because that person did not die because her intuition constantly tells her about this. Betty noticed, again she talks about her intuition, but what about her amazing abilities for inductive reasoning? The detective noted that this is not just intuition because she has evidence. Her evidence is the newspapers and the data that she is now carrying. 5 years ago in the kingdom of Datora, werewolves raided civilians. It was the so-called Bloody Night when a large and twisted monster appeared. People also called it the Beast of Javota. The man who hunted this monster was none other than Abraham Van Helsing. But he abandoned his reputation and no one saw him again. Betty asked what she meant by this. The detective noted that something happened 4 years ago. A situation occurred in the kingdom of Fatali adjacent to the empire, in a country ravaged by exploitation. the nobility and a mysterious thief with a black shadow appeared. His name was Arsène Lupin, and he acted for about a year and stole a lot of treasures. Then he disappeared and never appeared again. 3 years ago, a man also appeared in the kingdom of Delica, and this is the one who tried to start a war too. They named him James Moriarty, and soon he also suddenly disappeared and was never seen again. Another civil war that recently broke out in the kingdom of Utah was the winner of this war. But it was he who disappeared at the end of this war, Betty said. The main thing is that it can't be that she's trying to say that all these people are the same person. Rachel noticed, according to her calculations. It seems to be so. Here is the most recent place according to known information where he went. This is the city of Leatherwell. The assistant asked why someone with such abilities would hide his identity and wander around the world. The interlocutor asked how she would know this. In any case, it can be said that he is a man who once led the empire into chaos. But if he is still alive, then they will have to finish him off for sure. So she says you should go because she found a good place where they can stay. The interlocutor asked them where it is. The detective smiled and said that she was talking about the Kunst auction house. It was just that it was quite noisy in this house, and the manager came out to thank the girl for coming. He bowed before Her Majesty at the table, Princess Adriana van Exilian, then introduced himself and stated that his name was Evan Luke, and he was the one in charge of the auction. The girl was not in the best condition, so she said, "Nice to meet you, she is a little tired now, and could they show her the room where she will live?" The guy said that of course he would immediately show her to the VIP room. The interlocutor thanked him for this. Then she headed forward and was surprised how much it all cost. But if even one of them were sold, how many families could be helped? Just in this place, the main character was already there, who used a micro earphone and drew everyone's attention. He told his subordinates that he was ordering a group of unknown people to begin an operation. Alex smiled and said that this was great, because his hands were already itching. He thought that he would die of boredom after such a long wait. Then he thought that first of all he needed to meet Violetta downstairs. Suddenly something attracted his attention. There he noticed Annie, who had her back turned to the book, but realized that this was bad. He did not understand why it was there. He turned to Violetta and said that it would take some time to untie the laces and go downstairs. The girl thought that they had just started. And already everything was going awry. In that case, if it comes down to it, she'll have to do it in person. The first point of their plan is that they must find the key to enter the elevator. Roger remarked to Alex and Violetta that he leaves this to the two of them. So she turned to the man, called him handsome and asked if he could help her. She seems to have had too much to drink, so she asks if he will show her to her room. After some time he accompanied her, and she thanked her for this. The man said that of course he could not ignore the guest who came to the auction house. In that case she can rest a little in his room. Violetta said that he is really very kind, and the interlocutor closed the door and said that she needed to sober up in order to find her room. And this was done so that she would do this. Then he came close to her and asked if she wanted to play a fun game with him. The girl smiled after that, and said that she really liked funny games. But when he reached out with his hand, she immediately grabbed him and threw him over herself. The man was discouraged by what was happening and therefore did not even have time to react. And Violetta, who pulled off this action, asked how we liked this game. The girl exploded her hand and did not think that she would knock him out with one blow. Apparently it was not in vain that she learned to strengthen her body with the help of magic. And then she headed to the stand, which had a huge number of keys, and wondered where they needed it. It was very loud near the stage where the auction items were to be presented. The presenter introduced himself to the ladies and gentlemen, and thanked them for once again visiting their Kunst auction house. And without any further ado, you should look at the first lot of the second day. People say that this jewel was cried by the mermaid herself. So the stone that was presented and not having before was called a mermaid's tear. The audience was inspired. People said that it was very beautiful. Soon the bidding began at 1,000,000 dinars and it already reached 200 million. Adriana wondered if this was really a mermaid's tear because it looked so unusual. The person who was sitting next to her said that she might seem beautiful, but it was definitely fake. It was Detective Rachel who approached the princess and said that she seemed to be bored with the auction. The girl asked if they had really met before. The interlocutor noted that this was not so. This was not the first time this had happened. Her Highness asked in surprise. Then when she recognized her, the girl replied that she looked quite bored. Not many people would openly show displeasure in a place like this. Does she know that her hair is slightly rumpled in the back, so she was lying in her room recently? Although the smell of air freshener from the room lingered on her, she did not wear perfume. This was not for a nobleman who should pay attention to what others thought. In order to ignore what other people thought of her, in a place like this she must be royalty. There were also rumors that a princess came to this auction, and Adriana noticed that since she was sitting in the hall with her, it means she was an unusual person. The interlocutor noted that she really forgot to introduce herself. Then she handed over her business card and said that her name was Rachel Selma. She, in turn, was a detective. The girl said that she was familiar with this name. Is she really that famous private detective? She is a water magician who also received the title of Greenwater Celadon. The interlocutor noted that it was an honor for her that she recognized her. The princess was interested in what she did in her capacity, and in response she heard that she was invited here. This happened immediately after she arrived in the city, by the way, to be honest. There are more such events there, and incidents always happen, and so she asked to call it just her detective instinct. Roger walked along the hall and thought that everything seemed to have gone wrong from the very beginning, but Violetta is doing her job as best she can. Now he needs to team up with the guys. Suddenly a guy saw him, and asked who came here. Evan noticed that they met again, and what a coincidence it was, and the last time they saw each other was in that banquet hall with Roger Seeless. He doesn't even know what he's doing here, but he's very happy to see him. The hero looked at him, and realized who was in front of him. The interlocutor asked whether he liked the auction. The professor noted that this is how it is somehow worth visiting. The manager asked what else this meant, and as they say, he can see as much as he knows. Machiavelli remarked that all this was true. And then he went. Evan asked where he was suddenly going, and it seemed like he was the only one, so let him see him off. He remarked to the guards that this was an important guest, so let them treat him politely. They immediately agreed, and the hero wondered if he was specially following him. Apparently, he wanted to show his power here, but the plan they made will fail if they go after. Roger needed to be unknown and said that at the moment he could not move and was waiting for reinforcements. Hans was surprised and realized that he was reinforcements. Dave just turned to him and said that he thought it was time for him to go. The interlocutor noted that he knew, and so this device should help him get to any place. In addition to all this, let him call him Kafka. The boys said that this is for sure. And then can he call him Duma? They answered him that they were going to call him that. Hans thought that they would be delayed a bit, and in that case he had no choice but to go with Dave. After trying to use the device, he asked if it was jammed. It just blinked red and showed that a signal had been detected. The boy said to look, because it was blinking red. He replied that it was good. At least it was working. Suddenly a security guard approached them from behind and directed a beam of light, and asked what they were doing there. At the same time, he told them to show up immediately. The guy realized that this was bad because they didn't get caught, and he didn't even think that they would patrol this alley. After that, he turned to his friend and told him to do at least something. The guard shined a beam of light on the boy and asked what the hell was going on. It was just a child. Then he began to ask him what he was doing here. But after a few moments, he did not see him rushing at him with his fist. Dave knew perfectly well what he needed to do, so he hit him quite hard right in the stomach. The man immediately fell to the ground and lay completely unconscious. Hans did not understand what the hell was happening, where he knocked out this man with one blow. It's not clear who the hell he is anyway. Then he asked if he was a knight. The boy asked if he was really talking about a Superman who graduated from a military academy, received an official knightly appointment, and is significantly stronger than an ordinary person. The guy said, forget it, and this is a good job. This very guy should be tied up. Then they will hide him in a pile of garbage. An ally, this sounds good. Suddenly they heard another guard who was looking for his comrade. Dave, using the voice of that person, asked to wait because he was here. Hans was surprised when he heard such tricks. The man asked his colleague what he forgot in that alley. The boy replied in a strange voice that he should not go there, because he needed to take a leak. So he will return very soon, and we should wait a little besides. Everything was examined there, and there is nothing strange here. The interlocutor said that this disgusting thing should come to him quickly. The boy asked his friend how he liked this performance because the voice was the same. Hans was interested in how he did it, and who he was anyway. In any case, you should just turn off the device and go inside. The boy immediately agreed. Alex stopped near the wall, and then exhaled with relief, saying that he had finally made it. He in turn could not think that they would be there too, and how difficult it would be to go down the stairs. It turns out that now he better hurry up and meet Violetta, and then take the key. And when he opened the door and walked out right on the way, Violetta appeared and hid herself. The guy saw her and asked if this miss was okay. The interlocutor replied that she was fine, because she just slipped a little. Then with a smile on her face she raised her head up and thanked him for catching her. He replied that he should not worry about it. But at that moment the girl secretly gave him the key. The security guards stood very close and watched what was happening, but this did not arouse his suspicions. Alex walked a short distance, and then addressed his comrades through the earpiece. He announced that he had the key, so he went to the elevator. Richard called himself Melvin, and said that he would be waiting for him at the elevator. After some time he was actually there, and used his magical power. Therefore, absolutely no one could see him, and even Alex, who was passing nearby, did not feel or see him. When the man saw his comrade, he finished using the spell and said that he was there. The guy was surprised and said that he really scared him. Therefore, he asked if this was a manifestation of the spirit that beast people used to hide their presence. The interlocutor only responded by asking for the key. Alex noticed that he was straight to the point, and he had it, so he should hurry. Peeking around the corner, he noticed that, as expected, the number of guards had increased. Then, using an earpiece, he gave his fictitious names and said that they had approached the entrance. Sheridan also gave her call sign and said that she understood everything, so she was moving forward. She walked slowly for some time, merging with the crowd of people. But after that, a kind of fog began to appear from under his feet. Those present were surprised, asking where the steam came from. They coughed because of him, and did not understand what was happening. Perhaps this terrorist attack, the girl noticed that it was even better than expected, this special tear gas. The guard, who was also in your room, said that everyone should take cover. The other guards also need help, because they do not have enough people, so he asked the knight if he could help them. He said, "Is it really chemical terrorism, damn it? 2 of them will stay here and protect the elevator and let the rest go." Alex saw what happened and said that it all started. Then he turned to an ally who was standing nearby and asked if he could take care of those 2. He immediately agreed. When they saw Richard, they said that he called himself because this ozone is under protection. Alex immediately raised his hands and asked them to wait a little because there was a commotion there, and they got lost trying to find shelter. In general, if you think about it, don't they know who he is? Because he came here last time with his friend Evan Luke. He remembered exactly when he saw them close. The 2 of them were here then, and didn't know where Evan was. The man said firstly, not to come closer and stay in the same place. But as soon as they finished this sentence, Richard immediately rushed forward and hit them with both fists. The guy was dumbfounded when this happened and asked what the hell. He was wondering if he didn't at least kill them. The beast man said he was avoiding vital points. Alex came closer and then thought that the armor was bent with one blow. It was not at all clear how the leader of their group found such a guy. After that, he reported to the general channel that he and his friend had dealt with the guards at the entrance. Hans said that they would move out in this case. So he took the device that was in his hands and immediately pressed the red button. At the same time, he said that everything was fine, and then they went in and acted according to plan. The partner said that he understood everything. The presenter was just announcing that this was the next lot of the auction, and they were starting the auction with 500,000 diners. Soon they reached 10 million. The main character in fact was in this room and looked to the side, wondering if the guards were still chasing him. It would be quite difficult to move freely, and judging by the radio conversations that he hears, everything is going quite smoothly. Suddenly, her attention was attracted by one person who was sitting upstairs. Roger was actually dumbfounded when he realized that this girl was Private Detective Rachel Selma. Immediately he remembered the day when they were at the edge of the waterfall, and he asked in his mind whether this girl was there or not. They will die if she continues to do this. The interlocutor rushed at him and pushing, they flew down, so she said that she didn't care. And even if she couldn't defeat him now, she would pay with her life to convince them of a villain like him. Then she said that in that case, James Moriarty was preparing for the finals. The main character's thoughts were interrupted by the girl herself, who looked in his direction, and he immediately turned around. He, in turn, could not understand at all what the hell this woman was doing here at all. It turns out that he changed his appearance so that she could not recognize him. But this is the devil, incredibly skillful, and even earned the title of Green Saladone Water. But if it gets in the way of the operation, all further plans will go down the drain. Therefore, the head appeared in the mind of the father. She had not guessed by chance yet the plan, although this was not so. In that case, she would not have been so calm. It turns out that Rachel does not know what is really happening now, and the man can only hope that his subordinates will quietly and quickly complete the task. The man who was supposed to keep order at this auction yawned. He noticed how boring it was and what kind of brave scoundrel had thought of robbing Constant. His colleague told him that you weren't distracted by trifles here. The interlocutor asked what he was worried about because they have all these amazing artifacts. This one conveys a picture of what is happening. The guard replied that it was true. It was a pity to use such an interesting artifact only for security, and suddenly looked at the screen and asked what it was. A colleague asked what happened and what he was asking about. But it was unclear in response that he heard that there was interference in 2 rooms. But the man said that in his opinion everything was in order. The guy noticed that he was thinking. He was imagining things like this. Then the guard immediately stood up and said that he should wait a second. What the hell is this? The interlocutor said that he scared him, and asked what was wrong. The man shouted that this was an intruder. He cut through the wall and got inside, but this very place is deep underground. The manager was informed of this information, and he asked what else it was. Let them repeat it again. The guards said that there were reports of a violation in the second security room. Evan asked what about the guy who guards the entrance. In response, I received the words that since the intruder was able to get inside, something happened to him. The guy said that it didn't matter. In this case, let them immediately call the guards. Their chief said that this is excellent. It seems that everything is here. The intruder dug a tunnel and got inside. He told several subordinates to check the entrances to the sewers around this area and let the rest split into a group of porters and an assault group. Also, let them go with him to the storage facility. And they agreed. The man who looked through the artifact looked at the situation and said that the guards were going down the elevator. The manager was very worried because of this situation and did not understand whether these people even knew how much these artifacts cost or whether they really thought that he would just watch. Therefore, he asked that this is not done. The main task is to transfer the items to Storage 3. The assault team must go to Storage 2 and capture the enemies. The knight said that he understood everything. The group of porters should begin moving the items from Storage Facility number 3, and the assault force should follow to Storage Facility number 2. And then the assault group reported that they were opening the door to the right place. The interlocutor noted that the base was in contact, and the enemies were still a storage facility. Evan shouted to quickly go inside. The guards immediately followed his order, and when the chief entered there, he shouted that the intruders should not move. But suddenly they saw an empty space in front of them, and therefore reported that there was no one here. The manager was simply dismayed by what they said and asked how it was that there was no one, what they were carrying at all. The knight replied that there were no signs of intrusion and the item was untouched. The boss then aggressively asked what they thought he was looking at now. He was wondering if they had definitely confused him with another room. The very second he asked, and then everything changed on the screen, and it was visible how the knights were checking that room. Evan and the subordinate were dumbfounded, asking if the screen had changed and it was fake. The guards then asked what they could do. Perhaps they should return it to the third storage facility. The guy replied that it was not necessary. Let them move it to another place. The interlocutor agreed and said that they would pass this on to the security guards of the group of porters who are now in the elevator. The manager said that it was bad if it was a fake screen. Does this mean that someone reproduced fake frames in real time? The subordinate thought that someone replaced the frames that the artifact reproduced with their own. But for what purpose and what were they going to achieve? He simply swapped the frames, suddenly understood everything and shouted to the main one that it was a trap. The second room was just a trick, because it turns out that the robbers were targeting the third room from the very beginning. They planned to intercept the transfer of objects, which they did as directed. The assault group turned to the base and asked if they were in touch. In response, they heard that they were not in touch, and what had happened. After this, it was said that the elevator that led to the surface was destroyed and collapsed. But Evan couldn't believe his own ears and asked what they were saying. The guard said that they wouldn't leave here without an elevator, so they were asking for help. The workers said that they did not have internal forces that could help them and perhaps ask for help from the police. The manager shouted that there was no need. The reputation of the auction would collapse. If they find out about this situation, then everything will be bad. The interlocutor asked, but what should they do then? The guy was panicked and shouted that he couldn't know this. One of the guards shouted that in this case they would go there and try to stop them, so let them gather all the guards. So when they talked about it, they tried to leave the room, but for some reason the door did not open. They started knocking on the door and said that it would not open because it was unclear what was happening, and these were the tricks of Sheridan, who laughed and thought that everyone was locked. As a result, their leader came up with a plan that was quite amazing. She didn't know what to do when she first heard about the vault artifact. Remember Roger asking if she could do something? He in turn wanted to replace the footage from the vault that would be shown through the artifact, so he needed that same device to hack the transmission. Remembering that situation, she turned to the leader and said that she was in touch. Immediately after this, she reported that the mission to steal the artifact was successful. 30 minutes ago, several guards were beaten and were sitting in some kind of box. Dave asked his friend if it suited him. The interlocutor noted that it seemed to fit, but for some reason it fit so tightly to his stomach. It was so uncomfortable. Alex said that Richard dented the armor badly during the impact, and they patched it up but could not completely repair it. Hans noticed that then he was very comfortable with it. He further added that they will be there for blood, so I'll see you a little later. The interlocutor said that he understood, and then I'll see you downstairs. After that, he breathed out a sigh of relief and told Richard that it was good that they did not encounter a security group. The man asked to wait, because it is necessary to check the location of those guards. The guy looked at him and thought, could he really use the manifestation of the spirit in this way? And so the comrade reported that there were 8 guards in total, and they were all scattered in different rooms. Fortunately for them, there were 2 guards nearby who had separated from the rest. Alex was soon saying that he couldn't believe they were just hanging around the storage room. Well, that made it easy for them to be taken care of. After that, he looked at Richard and asked him to be patient a little, because not everyone is as big as him. At the same time, he told him to get ready because everything would begin very soon. They soon arrived at the rest of the guards, who told a group of porters to begin moving items into the 3rd storage room, and the assault group had to follow him to the 2nd vault and destroy the enemies. Someone said that he was again forcing his subordinates to work for his achievements and merits. The interlocutor noted that he does this because in Kansta, there are not many opportunities to stand out. So you just need to take your responsibilities seriously. In response, he heard that this was for sure, and they would be punished if they did not work at 100%. Soon they were in the elevator and said that they had successfully entered the elevator with the objects. The base said that the assault team is sending a group of porteurs, according to instructions, to carry all the items to a safe place above. Soon the same time came and the comrades thought whether they should start already. Some smoke appeared in the elevator, and the other guards asked what was going on, but soon everything became quiet. And all this happened because the attackers had already neutralized them. He picked up a metal spear and said that now they only had 1 step left and threw it straight along the ropes that held the elevator. Hans asked what he was doing, and the guy replied that he had damaged the lift so that the guys below couldn't get up. So it's time for them to get out of this place right now. Soon he asked if everything had already been loaded. If so, then you need to sit in the back seat, and they set off. Hans stated that he would return. The plan itself had changed, so he needed to quickly check what. Sheridan asked if he was talking about the item the leader was looking for. He replied that it was so, and knew that the real one was in the auction room. But he could not distinguish it from a fake. If this fake, they had to look for it again. The girl noticed that if the leader is with him, then everything is in order. Then they began to talk about whether they had loaded all the items, and that Violetta had returned. Roger's comrade thought that if you think about it, all these guys are not bad at fighting. It also seems that this is not the only thing they are good at. At the same time, Ali can do his gather information, so he wonders if he'll just be left behind. And these reflections actually disappointed him, and he would not have wanted that. So he slapped himself on the cheek and asked in his head what he was even thinking about. If that were so, the leader would have replaced him long ago and abandoned him. You should focus on giving him the fragment, the relic intact and safe. Then he turned to Parader and said that he probably couldn't answer right now. So let him listen. Everyone managed to escape safely, and he will collect the item he was talking about and bring it. It looks like the battery for the communication device is almost empty. He will be waiting for him in the central hall, so they will meet there. The hero thought that everyone managed to escape, and that's great. And a similar situation reached these guys. In this case, the man can easily leave and meet Hans outside. The guy walked along the hall and thought that there was no one there. This was because of the sleeping powder that the small one had scattered. Suddenly, he turned his attention to the side and saw people there, so he didn't understand why these guys were standing there. If everything happened like this, then most likely something is wrong.